Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vecenie. We are presented by CLNS Media. Today on the show, it is part 2 of the NBA Draft Big Board podcast. Returning again is Cole Zwicker. We are going to break down the top 8 prospects on my NBA draft board. Cole, it's been a long time since we chatted, obviously. How are things going on your end?
A full 24 hours, man. I feel like I'm already a corpse. So it's going well. I'm working on a 20-hour day. We'll see how this goes in the podcast. If I fall asleep, just make sure to bitch slap me a couple times. I'm ready to go.
I can do that. Yeah. I mean, the problem with all of this draft stuff and like trying to get sleep during it is that Laura and I went to go see Hereditary on Monday night, and Hereditary is genuinely one of the most terrifying movies I've ever seen. And both of us have woken up like in the middle of the night, like a little bit on edge. We will say, kind of, I don't know if it's thinking through the movie or what, but just a little on edge, just a little freaked out.
I think that's the magic elixir there. You don't mix scary movies with draft season. We only got a week to go, man. Keep it up.
Yeah. Oh my God. Let's get into this. So from 17 to 9, the rundown was Zaire Smith, Troy Brown, Robert Williams, Lonnie Walker, Kevin Knox, Mikal Bridges, Wendell Carter, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and Colin Sexton. If you remember, we broke it out into tiers on the last podcast. Tier 4 basically took us to Kevin Knox. We're in the middle of what I would call tier 3 right now. Even though those 4 guys went on the previous podcast, I would say realistically they're pretty similar to at least the next 3 guys on this board. Before we get into that, though, I wanted to talk to you about Charles Bassey. Charles Bassey has decided to commit to Western Kentucky and reclassify for the 2018 college basketball recruiting class. He will be eligible for the 2019 NBA draft by virtue of graduating early, a year ahead of the draft, as well as being born in the year 2000. You've seen Bassey a lot. I've seen Bassey a lot. I just saw him, 10 days ago at Pangos All-American Camp out here in Southern California. What are your thoughts on Charles Bassey as a potential 2019 NBA draft pick?
I mean, he definitely looks the part as far as a developed frame. I saw him over the week of practices at Hoop Summit, of course, pretty intricately. He honestly didn't pop on that world team as much as I expected. I mean, obviously, RJ Barrett was the premier prospect, but even like secondarily, Jalen Horde was far more interesting to me, other guys as well. So I didn't get a great read on him, I'd say. I probably have the worst read of any of the guys on the world team with Bassey just because he didn't do a ton during the scrimmages, during the skill drills. He showed some natural touch inside, and he can definitely change ends physically, but as far as his fit in the modern game, I didn't see a lot of ball handling. I've been told like lower levels, you see like in AAU play, like he'll be handling the ball behind his back. I didn't see any of that fluid control, and he didn't look to have 3-point range. He's more of a mid-range shooter. So as far as projecting his game to the next level, I don't really know what he is yet. I think I might come down a little on the lower end on him. What about you?
Yeah, I'm expecting to come down on the lower end. I mean, I tweeted out once it happened that right now I would expect him to be something like a lower lottery end projection for me. For a guy that is pretty universally considered like a top 5 prospect in his recruiting class, I would imagine that's pretty low. Like, I will also have Jalen Horde ahead of him. I will have Rui Hachimura ahead of him. I'm trying to think of, obviously guys like RJ Barrett, Nasir Little, Sekou Doumbouya, even like a Zion Williamson is more interesting to me than he is. And I'm not even a huge Zion Williamson guy.
Yeah, I'm definitely more interested in Zion from what I've seen. I don't think it's even like remotely close, just based on the sample that I have, which is very limited, of course. And Zion didn't play, of course, at Hoop Summit because he was injured. So, yeah, I mean, this whole class next year is going to be, I think, kind of disappointing, frankly, even though there are some really interesting guys returning to school, which kind of saves the class from what I've seen thus far. So I'm going to come down a little bit lower on some of these guys, and this is just a microcosm of that.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think RJ Barrett is a very real number 1 overall pick. I think Cam Reddish could get to the point where he could be seen as like a very real number 1 overall pick. Outside of that, a lot of these guys are more like mid-lottery, late lottery types to me. Like Sekou Doumbouya is very, very interesting just from a physical perspective, but there's not a whole lot there in terms of like what he's proved against super high level competition yet. Like this is not a Luka Doncic situation by any stretch of the imagination. And you know, some of these other guys like Rui Hachimura could have entered this draft. I think he probably would have ended up somewhere in the first round, but I mean, that's what we're talking about right around like number 10, number 11 in this class.
Yeah, there's not a lot of guys I'd bet on at this stage at a high level. And of course, we're dealing with like McDonald's, Hoop Summit, so very limited sample for me, All-Star circuit. But I love Nasir Little. I would bet on that guy based on the small sample I had. He was awesome during the McDonald's game. I think that guy's the real deal.
No, I agree with you in terms of being like a very, very good player. The problem with Nasir is his offensive skill set there yet to be like a top 3 pick in the draft. You know, because I have him at number 3 right now on my board, and I don't feel great about that, to be honest. Just like he plays super hard, he plays both ends, he can shoot it a little bit. He's still a little bit more comfortable putting the ball on the deck, but he doesn't have a whole lot of wiggle and shake to his game. Like he just needs to really refine his skill set to even get to that point where I'd feel comfortable with it.
Yeah, and I have him number 2 right now. I love his approach as far as his mentality, his defense, and I saw enough creation off the dribble. Again, small sample size, disclaimer here, but he did have a couple pull-ups in the McDonald's game. He looked pretty fluid, not great as far as like a primary scorer type, but I like how he plays both sides of the floor. And seeing a guy like Cam Reddish over the week of Hoop Summit practices, which was, it was kind of disappointing, frankly, as far as his approach. I mean, he has all the talent in the world. If Cam Reddish wants to be the best player in this class, I think he's right up there as far as just overall talent and fluidity, but I just didn't see it as far as mental approach.
Oh, there's no question. He will be the number 1 pick in the draft if he decides to be the number 1 pick in the draft. There's no player that has more natural talent in this class than Cam Reddish. But back to Bassey real quick. What's scaring me with Bassey is that he continues to put on weight and continues to put on muscle mass and strength, particularly in his upper body, to a point that I think makes it a little bit difficult to project him being able to even come close to defending the perimeter. Like he has a body like Dwight Howard right now, but doesn't move anywhere near at the level that Dwight Howard did when he was young. That stuff really, really scares me a lot right now. Like it is not out of the question that like by the time we get done with next season, like Charles Bassey is like maybe a first round pick, like not even like a definite first round pick, because his skills right now that really pop for you, he's a great rebounder and he has great touch around the basket. The mid-range shot still isn't consistent enough to where you trust it, really. The perimeter defense isn't going to be there. He plays tough and physical inside. He blocks some shots here and there, but like this is not a can't miss prospect. I think he's making the right call going into the 2019 draft in all likelihood, but he's not like a can't miss guy like most, top 5 recruits would be considered.
Yeah, I really can't add anything more to that. That's exactly what I think of it. When I saw him play, I was like, this guy's fine. He might be something down the road, but he didn't pop for me.
Yeah, let's move on. Let's talk about the top 8 players in this draft. This is presented by forhims.com. We'll get to an advertisement later on for them. Go to forhims.com/game theory for that free trial. Miles Bridges is number 8 on my board. I really wanted to try and get him a little bit higher because I'm a pretty big believer in him being just a valuable rotation starter at the next level. Where do you come down on Miles Bridges after he decided to not declare for the 2017 NBA draft, returned to school, basically did exactly what he did the year before, 17.1 points, 7 rebounds, 2.7 assists, solid 3-point shooting, got to the line basically at the same level? Where are we at on even the decision to return for Miles Bridges and then his prospects going forward?
I normally don't endorse guys that are high pedigree guys that will go lottery to return, but in Miles's case, I don't really think he hurt his stock. I actually think he helped it a little bit because he solidified the shooting for me. The free throw percentage went up, but more importantly, I just thought he showed more shot diversity. He showed more off the bounce as far as pull-up ability. He showed more off screens. He's really good off screens. I think that might be one of the most underrated traits in the class. Is that guy can come off a pin down. He can come off a floppy set his feet quickly, good footwork, good balance, and then elevate from 3. I think that's how he's going to cause a lot of chaos in the modern NBA because you can run him off screening actions. And if you have to close out hard to him, I think he's the best closeout attacker in the class as far as athleticism. He can take 2 dribbles and really explode. So I love his fit in the modern game. As far as offensively goes, if you don't put him in a high usage scoring role, you want him more as an off ball kind of advantage scorer. I think he's really going to wreck in that situation.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. He's a guy who's really going to take advantage of any sort of mismatch and any sort of space that you give him. He's just so much more athletic than just about everyone else that he's going to go up against in terms of explosiveness. That goes for his leaping ability, where he will be a legitimate threat to win a dunk contest one day. And it goes for his first step. I think he has a very, very good first step. And the other thing that he added this year was the ability to put the ball on the deck and actually like shake guys a little bit. Like he can actually kind of go between the legs. He has a pretty quick crossover now that allows him to attack closeouts in an even more dangerous manner than what he did as a freshman, when his ability to attack closeouts was one of the skills I pointed out in terms of him being a very high level prospect that I think was worthy of a top 10 pick last year.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, he showed the functional handle a little bit. He has a little bit of shake, at least enough horizontal quickness to get to his pull-up game, and he can blow by guys, even in isolation. So there is some upside. He's explosive in and out of his moves on offense, and I think he's going to be able to take advantage of mismatches, like you said. I'm a little concerned about the defense as far as his team defensive impact. He is not a very aware off-ball defender. He doesn't have the length. He's only got about 6'8.5", 6'9" wingspan. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm pulling it up now, but continue.
Yeah, so I think it's definitely not long. So he is definitely strong. He's lost weight apparently to get in better shape. I think probably better agility to guard more threes and play the 3 in the NBA, kind of that combo forward role. But I do worry about him off ball. His motor isn't excellent there. His IQ rotation-wise isn't there. He can protect the rim a little bit from the weak side because of his leaping ability, and he has that dynamic ability there, and he can switch. I think he's best in a switching scheme where he can utilize his strength, but I kind of worry about his focus off the ball.
So yeah, he is 6'6.5" in shoes, 8'7.5" standing reach, 6'9.5" wingspan. So actually came in a little bit bigger than what he had come in at the past. Obviously, as a elite level prospect, he'd been measured multiple times before the combine. Again, as you noted, came in exceptional shape, 5.9% body fat for a guy who at Michigan State sometimes did carry a little bit of extra weight. That's a really good number. And like 8'8" standing reach is enough to play the 4 in today's game. Like it just is. Like I feel okay saying that he might be able to step in for some possessions at the 4 and be able to take advantage of people offensively. Plus he is incredibly strong. Like that is someone who always brings up the factor of strength and just how important being stronger than people is at the NBA level. His strength is just so underrated, in my opinion. It really allows him to get up under guys defensively and cause problems whenever he's at the point of attack. And it also just kind of allows him to bully players in the posts that are smaller than he is. And, you know, if he plays the 3, I think he can take advantage of mismatches that way. If he plays the 4, I think he can actually stand up to some guys that are going to be bigger than him and not make it so that it is a plus expected value situation to go post up a smaller player.
Yeah, he's going to have to use his lower center of gravity to kind of anchor and leverage better. I think a couple times I saw him in post defense in college against bigger guys, and he got moved a little bit too easily, which you expect. It's going to take time to really get that stuff down. But look at how many wing kind of 4 combo forward players that we look at. It's like if only he had the requisite strength, if only he had the requisite frame, and this guy has it. And I think that's really underrated. He already has the body, and he has all of these additional qualities, the shooting at a high level with diversity there. He can defend in switch settings. So he has that projection that's just clear at this point. He doesn't rely on, can he develop his body? Can he develop his explosiveness? He's already ultra explosive, and he has the body. So he's kind of a plug and play guy for me. Yeah,
no, I agree with that. I think he's going to be able to step in immediately and contribute to, I don't know if it's going to be winning basketball because he's going to be going to a team that obviously wasn't very good last year. But to me, he's a guy who's going to be able to come in and contribute immediately, and that has a lot of value. In terms of his passing ability too, this is something we haven't really talked about yet, but one of the underrated things that he does when attacking closeouts is he does have the ability to find open players, either, attacking from one wing, getting into the lane, and then spotting the opposite corner. He can do that reasonably well. He's good at the little kick out pass on same side actions. There's just a lot of really interesting skills there that I think are going to make him like the ultimate role player, connective player. Like if I was going to compare one player to Andre Iguodala in this class, it probably would not be Troy Brown. It probably would more be Miles Bridges, even though Bridges isn't going to have that same ability to play point guard that Andre Iguodala has.
That's really interesting. I don't think he's going to be the level of defensive player as Iguodala, but I kind of get what you're saying is kind of a Swiss Army knife type that does a lot. He's going to shoot better than Iguodala. I feel pretty good about that. Iguodala was never like an off-movement shooter type. For me, Miles Bridges is more like you want to use him like an athletic Otto Porter and just run him off a bunch of screens, and then he's definitely more athletic. Like Otto Porter relies on like backward momentum fadeaways to get his shots on pin downs. I think Miles can separate a little bit better. So in that kind of role, I think he can really thrive. I like what you said about his passing. He's always been kind of a big space playmaker to me, but this past season, he actually refined his playmaking a little bit in tighter spaces. I actually watched the Kentucky game from 2016, his freshman year, and he had a ton of turnovers in that game. He was really pressing, and you look at him now, and I think he's a little bit better. So I think in several components of his game this past season, it might not resonate on the stat line, but I do think he's a more mature player, and maybe that extra year did him good as far as maybe refining his decision-making just a little bit.
Yeah, in terms of places that I would look at him and think he can be very valuable, Chicago stands out big time for me. I would love to see him in Chicago. If they took him at 7, I would not think that is an overdraft. I think some people have him a little bit lower on their board than I do, but I think that would be an absolutely fantastic fit. I think Cleveland would be a great fit with or without LeBron James. New York needs wings incredibly badly. That would be a great fit. Philadelphia would be a great fit for a lot of the off-ball screening action they run around Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. Charlotte would be a great fit. The Clippers would be a great fit. Denver would be a great fit. Literally everywhere from 7 to 18, 19, 20, like every single one of those teams could use a player like Miles Bridges. I can't really see him falling that far on draft night.
Yeah, I totally agree. I was going to say that the 8 to 10 range specifically, I don't know if he has enough momentum to go 7, but like you noted, the fit would be great. But in the 8 to 10 range, let's say LeBron stays in Cleveland. That's exactly the kind of guy that could help LeBron right away as far as be able to guard some bigger guys with his strength and then shoot the ball. They just need more two-way guys. And then the Knicks, that'd be a great fit next to Porzingis, can kind of play the combo forward role there. Philadelphia could really use him. They need some extra playmaking, a guy who can switch more. Everybody needs a guy like Miles Bridges. Maybe his upside isn't immense, but I really love his median outcome in this draft. And you see some mock drafts that have him falling to 14 or something to Denver. He should not fall that far. I mean, he's clearly a peg ahead for me of guys like Lonnie Walker, Kevin Knox. I just think he's a better player as far as cerebralness and athleticism. He's a dynamite athlete. I think Ben Rubin, who writes for The Stepien, makes this point all the time. You don't see guys of his caliber of athleticism and shooting fall outside the top 10 basically ever. Yeah,
if he went below Lonnie Walker, that would just be the craziest thing to me. I like Lonnie. He's fine, but Miles Bridges can really play, and he can play in a team setting. He can play in a setting at Michigan State that kind of held him back this year, to be honest. I think that it was a setting that allowed him to float, and I think that can sometimes be his biggest question mark, right? Is that he doesn't attack the game all the time in the way that you would hope he would with his athleticism. He did take probably more threes than he should have in college basketball last season, but to me, it kind of just prepped him for his role in the NBA. He's going to be someone that is going to be relied upon to be a floor spacer, that's going to be relied upon to attack closeouts in the way that he did. So, yeah, I mean, he's just an excellent basketball player.
I totally agree, and I think to situation, just one last brief point. You see him pulling up a lot. I think he's gotten some negative press for that, just settling for jumpers. But when you slow the film down a lot of times, there's no driving lane because like Nick Ward's hanging out underneath the basket. There's nowhere to really go. So I think he would probably take it harder to the rim more often with more NBA space. He's definitely the profile and the makeup of a guy that goes to the NBA and thrives in enhanced space there.
I really might move him up even further by the time my final board comes up. Because the more that I look at his game, the more I'm just like, this dude is awesome. And I want him on my team. But the problem is the rest of the guys on this board have like very real all-star potential. And it's like Miles Bridges could get to an all-star game, but I don't know that that's necessarily going to be his final result yet. He's certainly athletic enough to. He shoots the ball well enough to. But the rest of these guys, I think, have like very real star power, and it's a good way to kind of get into what will ultimately be the Trae Young discussion here. I have Trae Young at number 7 on my board. This is lower than where he is on yours, correct?
That's correct.
You have him at you're going to have him at 3 or so, right?
I'm going to have him, most likely 3, at the worst case 4.
Yeah. So Trae Young obviously led the country in points and assists. 27.4 points per game, 8.7 assists per game, 3.9 rebounds per game. 42% from the field, 49% from 2-point range, 36% from 3. All of those numbers outside of, I would say, the 2-point number, probably a little bit lower than what his skill set actually is. 58.5 true shooting percentage, despite a usage rate of 37.1 that could only be described as Westbrookian. Just took on an incredible load this year at Oklahoma and brought them from a team that was projected to finish 9th in the Big 12 all the way up to a team that, made the NCAA tournament and went to overtime with a pretty tough Rhode Island team.
I think just to start out the Trae Young discussion, we've talked about him for an entire podcast, so everybody kind of knows our thoughts for intricate details, but I think this is just one of the philosophy guys in this class. If you want to shoot for upside, I think that Trae Young in the modern game has one of the highest upsides in this class as far as his skill set, applying that level of shooting off the bounce, how that warps defenses. And again, I like what you noted about kind of some of his stats being suppressed by the usage. I just think he's a much better shooter than 36% from 3. I mean, you look at, I know cleaning the glass did that breakdown, but even before that, you look at some of his stats, 14 of 19 on unguarded catch and shoot threes in the half court. This guy, everything was just hard for him. He had no help. Nobody was creating shots for him. So, I mean, part of it is not I'm not going to leave him blameless because he did choose the situation and he had the biggest green light we've ever seen basically from a freshman. But at the same time, I do think at the next level, this guy can play off the ball. He can be a knockdown shooter in my opinion, but there is downside risk. Not as much as a smaller guy who can't shoot, because guys who can shoot always have a safer floor because you can play them off the ball and they'll have gravitational force off the ball. But overall, I do get the size and the defense concerns for sure. That's there. It's a riskier pick.
So I think a lot of what comes down to where you have Trae Young on your board is you need to assess 3 factors. There's a 4th one, the passing, but we can just knock the passing out immediately, I think. He's an absolutely elite passer, in my opinion. I have no concerns about the passing. Would you agree?
I mean, for the most part, 100% I agree with you. Outside of if he gets trapped, I think he's going to have some issues as far as his size. He doesn't have the same passing angles as a Luka Doncic, but he's so damn crafty, I think he's going to figure it out. Yeah,
I think it's going to be really hard to trap him by the time that he kind of figures out everything and gets really coached up and trained up in pick and roll settings like that. He's just so shifty and so dynamic with the ball in his hands in terms of getting separation that I'm really not all that worried.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first step to this, I think, is, whenever we did this podcast, we ran through, and the Trae Young podcast happened on February 21st. So if you roll back through this feed, you'll be able to find that podcast where I think we talked for 45 minutes on Trae Young. This one's going to be 10 minutes. The first thing you have to figure out is how good is he going to be at getting separation? Because that's the number one thing I look at for lead guards. And I'm a little bit worried about the first step against super long, super elite guards, but he is so dynamic in terms of change of pace and change of direction. His hips are so fluid that I think he's going to be able to get pretty good separation against even hyper elite NBA defenders.
For me, it just comes down to he's going to have the threat of his shot, and that is so important in the modern game. I would rather have that, honestly, than unlimited athleticism, because we see guys that come into the league that can't shoot, and defenses just sag off those guys, and there's no way even the main athleticism guys can burn by coverages that drop off by 4 feet or so. So they're going to have to press up on him, and he won enough individual matchups in college. I'm not super worried about him creating space with the threat of his shot. He's shifty enough, and his burst, his horizontal quickness right away isn't bad. I think it's actually pretty underrated. He beat Javon Carter pretty consistently when they played. I mean, Javon definitely won some of those matchups contesting shots that Trae settled for, but I thought when Trae Trae went to the basket. He beat him. He went against Herb Jones. He had trouble freeing himself off the ball, but I thought on the ball, he crossed up Herb Jones a couple times, created separation. You saw him shoot over length. So he's done enough in the college setting to where I feel comfortable with him getting his shots off and getting to his spots.
Yeah, and you mentioned the threat of the shot. And the big thing with the threat of the shot with him is that it keeps defenders off balance because the release is so fast. His ball pickup is basically like top 5 in the world. Like, I don't think it's as good as like Damian Lillard or Stephen Curry, but it's lightning quick and the release is so fast and he's such a proficient shooter that defenders always have to be worried about that. They can't like take a rest for even a split second mentally against him. And that's why I think, to your point, he's going to be able to get separation. Number 2, how good of a shooter is he? Because I know that, you can bring up the numbers in terms of unguarded catch and shoot shots. He went 14 of 21 according to Synergy in unguarded catch and shoot shots. That's fantastic. 100th percentile in the entire country.
And two half-court attempts. I went through the actual attempts.
Did you? Okay. So, 88th percentile in jump shooting off the dribble, 52.3 effective field goal percentage. I will say that I think that he needs to continue to put on strength to become an elite jump shooter, much in the same way that Stephen Curry had to, much in the same way that, maybe not Steph, but much in the same way that Damian Lillard had to get that percentage up from like 36% to 40%, which he's very capable of. He absolutely has that. But part of what you saw this year was just endurance and having to take on the load that he had to take on, and he was doing that in 2 games a week. NBA, you're going to have 4 games a week. This is going to get harder for Trae. I think he really needs to continue to work on that endurance, continue to work on that physical strength so that by the time January rolls around, he's not hitting a wall.
Yeah, I think it's an attrition issue for him as far as strength. Can he hold up for an entire regular season and then into the playoffs? I like how you tied that into shooting. Of course, his mechanics don't rely on strength. It's all upward momentum. He has a really easy release. He can shoot from 30 feet blindfolded. Like, as far as like strength goes, he like doesn't. That's not an issue for me there. But as far as holding up fatigue-wise, I totally agree. One thing we talked about on that podcast that we did about Trae is his balance is elite. Yep. That is big. I mean, I've studied these point guards really closely this year for rookies just because I've been really enamored because, of course, it was a great class. So many of these guys struggle with balance, decelerating. Dennis Smith, his footwork isn't great. Lonzo Ball really struggles with this. Trae's already got this stuff down. Whenever he does something, it's always on balance. He can quickly square up to the basket. So I think that he's going to shoot a lot better than most rookie point guards do.
The third point for me on offense with Trae is finishing at the basket and drawing fouls. Obviously, he drew a ton of fouls this year at the basket, and it made his proficiency a little bit easier to swallow. But NBA defenders are just better. They're not going to fall for some of the stuff that Trae Young does. Like, he's not James Harden. He can't go up and through guys and still finish. That part of his offensive game is something I am concerned about.
And I will echo that entirely. I will say that he has one counter to that, and that it's his touch. He has incredible touch on the move. He's going to have to rely on craft. He's not an explosive finisher. He's not going into NBA rim protectors if he can't draw fouls and then try to finish around the top using his body. It's just not going to work. So he's got to really refine all of that stuff. I don't want to make the overall comparison because people might get ahead of themselves. I'm not saying he's going to be Steve Nash, but you got to study a guy like that, his tape, and see all of the different angles that he converts shots at, because that's how he's going to win on the interior. He just has to be good enough to get close to the basket and then use craft to finish. And I think that's possible because he does have that natural touch ability.
I agree with that. Also, his runner game, floater game is really good. Really polished. 47% on runners this year. Not like a super elite number necessarily that you want him taking runners every time he goes into the paint, but that will help keep defenders off balance and give him a secondary option.
100%. I mean, I think the two big issues for me are the finishing and then the defense. And
that's
the defense
where we're going next.
Yeah, the defense is issue. I'll let you take that one away.
Very concerned about defense. Very concerned about defense. He is going to get headhunted every game as a rookie. Just every single game, teams are going to try and get him switched on to bigger guys. And the problem is that it's not even just post touches that are going to hurt him. It's the fact that he is just not physically strong enough at the point of attack to where he can even handle someone like a Kawhi Leonard, LeBron James, Giannis Antetokounmpo. But I think even if you match him up against like a Trevor Ariza, like he might even be able to like get by him.
Yeah, and I think that even against lead guards, they're going to be able to run through him at times. I mean, look at how big some of these guys are. 6'4"
Elfrid
guys.
Payton is going to go through him.
Yes, and it's going to take a while. It's going to take a while to build core strength. He's already added apparently 10 pounds, and he's still 179, I believe. So it's going to be a process. He's got to win with technique. He's just got to get tougher. He's got to get more physical. And we just rarely saw him really engage last year. I mean, if you want to see him actually play defense, watch the first half of the Texas Tech game, the first time they played. That's the first time I've seen him really engaged all year, and he was actually pretty solid. His effort level, I think he has the instincts on that side because he's so smart offensively. I think there's more untapped potential on that end because he was obviously told not to foul because he was the offensive engine. If he got in foul trouble, the offense sunk. He was switching off ball a lot of times to stay away from the play. He didn't try a lot, but yeah, the size, there's no counter for that. He doesn't have the physical tools to be an impact defensive player or even an average defensive player. It just comes down to how bad is he going to be? Is he going to be Isaiah Thomas bad, or can he be 2017 Damian Lillard acceptable?
Yeah, we'll see.
We'll see.
If the entire offensive package comes together, Trae Young is an absolute all-star point guard, in my opinion. I have number 7 on this board. If I was ranking just on like ceiling of players, probably would have him below DeAndre Ayton. Probably would have him below, like, you could make a case for him at 2. He's like somewhere with like Porter and Bamba, like in there for me. Just an unbelievable ceiling if everything comes together. The problem is that the floor outcome is low here. If he can't defend, he is a negative player in all likelihood, right?
Unless he's just supernova offensively.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen Isaiah Thomas has made an all-star game, and he was absolutely ridiculous offensively. And Isaiah is a much better finisher than Trae is as far as explosiveness and like using his body and all that. But yeah, if he's a -4 or a -3 kind of defender, that's going to take a lot off the table. He can still make all-star games and be an impact offensive player if everything goes right for him on that end. But as far as contributing to winning, he's probably more of a conference finals kinds of player at his peak because he's going to run into some matchup that's going to hurt him because of his defense.
Yeah. Like trying to think through guys who have been like him in the past is very difficult because even someone like Terry Rozier got headhunted this year in the playoffs. Even someone like Kemba Walker gets headhunted in the regular season now. And guys in the past like Steve Nash, sure, they got taken advantage of defensively, but teams weren't as cognizant of doing it whenever Steve Nash was around. Like they weren't trying to hunt mismatches every single time down because Phoenix switched every defensive action. It's going to be better for Trae, I think, if he goes to a situation where teams are not as set on switching. He needs to find an organization that is more willing to do that. And the good news is that number 6, Orlando, Steve Clifford is the perfect coach for him, I think, defensively. He's dealt with Kemba Walker before. He's dealt with slow-footed big men before to where he wasn't able to switch defensively. It's not something that he enjoys doing all the time. It's kind of a really strong fit there.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think for Trae, the switching thing is really interesting because if you are a team, let's say he gets drafted to the Cavaliers or something, and then LeBron goes west and he ends up meeting LeBron somehow in the finals in a hypothetical world. He's got to outlast LeBron's timeline here because he can't go against a player like that. I'm not as worried about Trae because the next generation of kind of big players or play more like bigs, like as far as ball handlers go, like Ben Simmons, Giannis Antetokounmpo, those guys aren't shooting threats as far as pull-up threats. So I don't think that's why I have Trae a little bit higher because I'm scared to death of a guy like LeBron against Trae. I think that you lose that series just by virtue of that matchup. But the rest of the guys, I think he will outlast LeBron's kind of core. So I want Trae to go to a team that's competing in maybe 4 or 5 years. But I like what you said about the magic fit. It just comes down to me is that's an obvious fit. They needed a point guard who can shoot forever. He fits their like what they want to do because they just need primary creation. They need shooting. But I don't know if that's the MO of the front office. What do you think about that?
It's a good question. So that front office, led by Jeff Weltman and John Hammond, they tend to value character highly. A guy like Trae Young, I think, fits that really, really well. They've obviously in the past valued length, valued athleticism a lot too. Does not fit Trae Young necessarily. You can kind of swing it both ways on that. It's kind of, 6, what the fuck is that thing? 6 of one half dozen of another. Is that the way you say it?
I think that's a saying.
Who the hell knows? But like, I don't know. I can't sit here and tell you what Orlando is thinking. I actually don't know too many people in that front office. Cleveland would be strange if LeBron was there or if LeBron was not there. If LeBron's not there, it's going to be really fun because he'll get the team. If LeBron is there, it's going to be really fun because he can play off of LeBron and just be like an absolute knockdown shooter and be the point guard that Cleveland has needed for a while. I can't imagine Cleveland passing on him if he's there, to be honest.
It's really fascinating because if LeBron stays, LeBron is he's in compete mode. I don't know if Trae can play against the Warriors or the Rockets, though. That's the thing, is I just don't know if he can do that right away. I think he's going to be a liability. Even with his shooting off the ball, I don't think he's good enough yet. He's going to take him a couple of years to figure it out. His first season, he's not going to be ready. He's got to have that adjustment because he's not one of those high athleticism guys who just comes in and fits right into the speed of the game. I think it's going to take him a little bit of time to iron out as far as reacting to the length. But if LeBron leaves, I would take him at 8 to Cleveland, and I don't think he gets past New York at 9. I think that is his floor. I can't imagine them passing on him because the fit is just too good. I mean, you think about him playing a pick and roll with Porzingis, that's exactly the kind of big that he needs, because that's going to suck the big that's defending the paint out of there, give him more space to drive and give him more space to pass, give him better passing angles. You have Ntilikina defensively. They can kind of alternate lineups in that backcourt. So I love the fit in New York.
You know what one thing about Trae Young is, though? Sorry to say it, but he's one of the 66% of men that are going to lose their hair by the age of 35. The thing is that when he will start to notice hair loss, it's going to be too late. If that hairline is slowly starting to move backwards or you have any bald spots, you got to just kind of ask yourself, how are you going to feel a year from now if it's business as usual up there? Do you want a bald spot to pop up, or do you want to do something about it first? The solution there is forhims.com, a one-stop shop for hair loss, skincare, and sexual wellness for men. Thanks to science, baldness can be optional. Hims connects you with real doctors and medical-grade solutions to treat hair loss, well-known generic equivalents to name brands prescriptions to keep your hair, to help you keep your hair as well. No snake oil pills, no gas station counter supplements, prescription solutions backed by real science. There's no waiting room, no awkward doctor visits. You save hours by going to forhims.com. It is so easy. My offer for you now, my listeners get a trial month of Hims for just $5 today, right now, while supplies last. See the website for details. This would cost hundreds of dollars if you went to a doctor or a pharmacy. Go to forhims.com/game theory. That's FORHIMS.com/game theory, GAMETHEORY, forhims.com/game theory. Cole, number 6 on my board is Michael Porter Jr. You and I have talked about Michael Porter recently, so we probably should not belabor this one necessarily. Where do we fall on everything that we have now seen about Porter through the pre-draft process?
First of all, that was the best transition to an ad I think I've ever heard on a podcast. So well done, man. That was fantastic. Michael Porter, I don't know what the fuck to do with Michael Porter, man. I honestly don't. Like, he's the hardest guy to pin down in the class overall because of the back injury, because of the character stuff that's been leaked out. How concerning is that? Does he want to play like Rudy Gay and Carmelo, where he catches and holds and it's like a one dribble pull-up guy? Or is he amenable to playing like the 4 version of Paul George? Just run him off a bunch of pin downs, a bunch of screens, utilize his ability to shoot, his gravity there. You know, we can't do anything really with the sample that we saw in college because he was a shell of himself athletically. He looked stiff. He couldn't jump. I don't know. This is like the most risk tolerance question outside of Trae Young, because with Trae, you know what you're getting. It's just, do you assume the risk of the downside? But he's more proven as far as his general state. With Michael Porter, I don't know what the hell to do with him, man.
I'm in the same boat. I don't know where to put him on the board. I put him at 6 because the ceiling is legit, like 25 point a game scorer. Wouldn't be all that insane if he was able to bring it all together scoring wise. I don't know, man. Beyond that, like, there are some real questions, and teams are going to have the information that we don't. And that's why a lot of this is kind of foolhardy. Like, you and I have seen him a lot before he even got to Missouri. We kind of talked about that on the podcast that we did, and I still don't really have a great feel for it. Like, it's it's really tricky. I mean, we talked about him May 23rd, 2018, and you can go listen to that podcast for more information. But, it's now June 13th that we're recording this, and he's now worked out for a lot of teams. He has had a doctor examine him, but I don't have those results yet. I don't have information on them. I don't know what to do.
Yeah, and I'm right there with you. It's going to depend so much on teams, how they interview, what they feel about him as a person, his work ethic. All of that stuff is going to come in paramount with him. I was just thinking about it. I'm trying to empathize with how I would act if I was a GM, because it's easy for us to I'd take him second because of his talent level. But really, if you're in that situation, just playing the empathy card, how comfortable would you be taking him in the top 5 of this class? I could make arguments. I'd feel much more comfortable taking Miles Bridges, for example, because I know what I'm getting, right? Porter could be, God willing, he'd be injured in 2 years, and you're getting no return on your investment. And I don't know if his upside is through the roof good. If this guy was Durant 2.0, I would take the risk 100%. But I don't think he's that caliber of star player. I mean, he can score. His first step isn't great. All the stuff we talked about on that podcast. I don't know if his upside is considerable enough for me to really roll the dice in the top 3-4 in this class. It's just too much of a risk, man.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, but the reward is very real. He is an explosive athlete who can finish far above the rim, has a 9-foot standing reach, so you can maybe even play him at center occasionally. 6'11". Yep. Everything that you're looking for as a scorer is potentially there. I think he also, I don't think he has the settle mentality like Rudy Gay does. I'm sorry. I think he does have the attack mentality to be a good scorer, but we just don't know. This is a scary, scary proposition for teams.
Yeah, I mean, on my big board, I'm probably going to have an asterisk next to him because I honestly don't know what to do. What if you find out that this guy's actually generally not a great guy? And I'm not saying that by any means on the record. I'm just saying, would you bet on somebody like that with the situation? It's going to come down again to intangibles for me. As weird as that sounds, you really have to believe in this kid and his work ethic and his ability to contribute to your team and want to contribute to winning basketball. I think that's key. Yep,
I agree with that. In terms of where he is taken, I probably wouldn't be looking until 7. Dallas will certainly look at him. Sacramento is seriously looking at him from what I've been told. They really want to get to know him as well as they can. It would be a very Kingsy pick to take him at number 2. I think that front office has actually done a pretty good job going away from Kingsy picks. Please don't take Michael Porter, Sacramento. Just please don't.
Yeah. That's way too rich, man. Passing on Luka Doncic for, oh my goodness. Yeah, don't do that.
Yeah, just don't. Please don't. Then you look at Atlanta could look at him. Memphis, I think, will look at him even. Dallas is going to look at him. If I was Orlando, I wouldn't really go that route. Chicago will look at him. He's represented by Mark Bartelstein. You and I have talked about the Bartelstein Bulls connection for a while. Cleveland, again, will look at him. New York will look at him. The funny reports that are coming out, though, is that NBA teams, it would seem, feel very similarly as we do because, Ian Begley yesterday at ESPN reported something teams in the 4 through 8 range are calling the New York Knicks to gauge if they're interested in trading up for Michael Porter. If Michael Porter is so good, then why aren't you just taking him? You know what I mean?
Oh, it totally seems like the teams at the top are trying to utilize his pedigree to get somebody to move up for what his perceived value would be and then trade back and get a considerably the same player. I mean, you can make an argument that, you can get Trae Young at 8. He's the same caliber of prospect as Michael Porter, considering the factors that are into Porter right now as far as injury risk and all of that stuff. So I think the teams are definitely going to play that card.
Yeah, no, it's just funny. That's this part of the year we're at this stage. I don't have strong, I don't have strong feelings on this at this stage. It's too hard to even begin. If you want more of a breakdown on Michael Porter's game, again, I would implore you to go listen to that May 23rd podcast because we talked about his skill set in depth there. Mohamed Bamba is the guy I have at number 5. I texted you on
this
Sunday.
Is so great, dude.
And said I think I'm moving Mohamed Bamba up to 4 on my board. And I did, and then like I went back and kind of watched a lot of tape again just to give like a final, semblance of caring about all of this. And I couldn't do it. I decided I just had to have Bamba at number 5 on this board, below Bagley, below Jaren Jackson. And it's not to say that I think these guys are in considerably different tiers, because this is where tier 2 starts for me. Those 3 guys, Mohamed Bamba, Jaren Jackson, Marvin Bagley, are my tier 2. And in Bamba's case, the great skills are so overwhelming, right? Like his ability to block shots with his 7'10" wingspan is insane. His ability to potentially shoot threes is something I think he's legit just going to be able to do at some point. I believe in the work that Drew Hanlon has done on his jump shot. Great rebounder, obviously, due to the length. Moves his feet well in space. What are your worries with Mohamed Bamba?
I think there's some downside. Let's say that he doesn't shoot. How does he really score at the next level? He's not a high-level dribbler. He's coordinated, but he's not really that functional. He's like not Jaren Jackson. He's not Marvin Bagley, not Wendell Carter there as a ball handler. So I worry about him there. He doesn't have the girth. So much of his projection is tied to physical upside as far as how much pop can he add? How much girth can he add? Can he anchor in the post? You can move him around. Like if he's a straight pick-and-roll dive guy to the rim, if you rotate the weak side wing over and get into his legs, I think you can knock him off his spots. He's not DeAndre Jordan where he's flying in and he doesn't care about contact. I think that he's going to struggle a little bit initially with those sets. So you look at a guy who I don't think moves quite as well as other people do, like the whole one switch 1 through 5 narrative. Like that dude, I could probably compile a list or compile a clip that's like 2 minutes this year of him just getting absolutely rinsed in space. Like Zaire Smith, Trae Young, these guys were just blowing by him at will. I don't think he's that good moving his feet, but he has the highest margin for error we've ever seen for a guy who's coordinated. Like 7'10" wingspan, he can recover. He's not that quick off the floor in my opinion as far as that goes, but it doesn't really matter. Like he has such a high margin for error. I think he's going to be a great rim protector, but he's not like a straight 1 through 5 switch guy. And offensively, if he doesn't shoot, what is his primary skill at the highest levels of play? Like what is he really adding to your offense? I'm not saying it's going to be Hassan Whiteside necessarily, but I think that kind of downside exists where he just doesn't function in that kind of setting. So for me, he's a boom or bust prospect. I don't think he's going to necessarily flame out. I think he's got a high enough floor to where I'm comfortable with him in a certain role. But if it never goes right for him as a shooter, if he never adds the requisite athletic ability, I think the downside is a lot more considerable than a lot of people do.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people are minimizing that downside because of how good of a kid he is and how hard of a worker he is. That doesn't mean the downside doesn't exist, though. It just kind of doesn't. What I will say about him, I would even take it a step further offensively than you. Forget even just like function as a scorer. How does he function as an offensive player if he can't shoot the basketball? Because not a guy who can pass at all. Like 3.6 assist rate, that's going to be, if not the lowest assist number of any like top 5 pick in the past, it's going to be up there as one of the lowest assist numbers of any top 5, top 7 pick in the past. Not a guy that you can trust on short rolls. Pure finisher at this stage of his career, in my opinion, and likely in his future career, in my opinion. As a defensive player, I very strongly agree with you. He is not a 1-5 switch guy. People can sell that as much as they want. I think you're even going to want to drop him. Like drop him back in pick and roll coverage. You can maybe do some aggressive stuff and do some trapping due to his length. I think that could be like a very interesting strategy because you can see worlds where he just causes so many issues with that length. But just because he's a versatile pick and roll defender doesn't mean he's a guy you're going to want to straight switch with and put like him on an island with someone like Eric Bledsoe even.
I totally agree with you. And I'm glad you brought up the assist point because that's kind of what I was getting to with Whiteside is what does he do on the floor if he can't really function as a dive guy? Obviously, Bamba has a better chance to shoot than that. So you're really, betting on Drew Hanlon here, which is a great bet because he's awesome at what he does. Yep. But if Bamba doesn't shoot, man, and he doesn't add considerable pop to be like a really high gravity roll threat, I think there's downside there. And the defense, Yeah, pick and roll. I like him dropping back. I think he can maybe in time, if he adds the right amount of explosiveness, if he gets like stronger legs and he can move laterally quicker, maybe he can play at the level of the screen. He can always play off another step and a half because of his length. So that's his winning point, is like he doesn't have to crowd you and he can just utilize his length in space. But man, like there are outcomes for him that are not great. And I think people equate a lot of his smarts with smarts on the floor. If that makes sense. Like I think that with the passing point, like Jaylen Brown was similar to him. I've compared those two, even though Jaylen already had the NBA body, Bamba doesn't. But Jaylen is incredibly smart, self-aware off the floor, kind of like Bamba is. But on the floor, he's not like the smartest passer, and I don't think that's ever going to be a part of his game. I feel the same way about Bamba. Like just because he's a highly intelligent player and he's going to pick up on things really well, that doesn't mean he's going to be a good passer, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's unfair. In terms of the defense, like I still think he is potential defensive player of the year talent. Just because he's not a 1-5 switch guy doesn't mean that he can't create just a remarkable, incredible impact as a defender. Like the ceiling is still very much there.
Oh, absolutely. The ceiling is there. That's why I have him higher than a lot of guys on draft Twitter who are more skeptical. There's a wide variance of guys as far as positions when it comes to Bamba. It's very tricky because I think that's a microcosm of just how his stock is as a player. Like you're either all in kind of, or you're like kind of out on him. It's hard to be in between because he is that kind of high variance player. I'm
so happy I'm kind of in the middle on this. Like just randomly, I somehow have found the middle on Mohamed Bamba because I think he's going to shoot it. I really do. I think he's going to be a guy who can pick and pop, not going to be like a versatile pick and roll player. It's either pick and pop or roll all the way to the basket. Like you're not going to sit here and short roll him. But I think he's going to be able to shoot it, and that's going to give teams value. And I think he's going to be a great rim protector, unquestionably, who's going to block a ton of shots at the NBA level. Don't think he's going to be like an elite space defender by any stretch, but he can create enough impact as a defender at the rim just due to his length and due to the way he protects the rim to where he can be just an elite defender. He like that skill set is so valuable.
Yeah, for sure. I have a lot of points I want to make in regards to him and Jaren Jackson. I'll leave that for when we talk about Jaren in a second. But I do think, just to hammer this point home, a lot of his upside is tied to physical development. Like he needs to get stronger. He needs to get tougher. His motor doesn't burn hot. It's not like this guy plays hard 24/7. That's not the case. Like there are deficiencies in his game. I see the people that see him talk. I think a lot of, I don't want to like guilt trip NBA Twitter who are just getting to a lot of these prospects, but you see him talk and the guy's a politician. I mean, it's unreal. I could listen to that guy talk every day, all day. And you see the length, you see the highlights, but there's a lot of plays on his tape that leave a lot to be desired as far as his effort level and his physicality. And you're talking about a 5 in the modern game. Like everybody compares him to Rudy Gobert with a 3. I think he's got a long way to go physically to be Rudy Gobert.
Yeah, like the thing with Rudy was that his growth as a final product didn't end until physically. I mean, didn't end until like last year. He kept getting quicker, stronger, faster every single year. And that's not a normal development process. That is Rudy Gobert being a freak, one-of-a-kind worker that Utah has fostered in the way that they have. Like I said, I'm happy to be in the middle on this one. I'm happy to have Mohamed Bamba at 5. His ceiling is legit, like all-star center, I think. Maybe I don't think he is a player that can lead a team to an NBA championship. I think he's probably like a second or third guy on your team if you're competing for a title, but can be a very valuable one at that. Can be a very, very useful player.
Yeah, I don't disagree with any of that. I don't know where I'm going to have him in my final rankings. He's in the 3 through 10 tier. I ended up including some of the median outcome guys in that tier, like a Miles Bridges. Like I think Miles Bridges' median outcome is probably more valuable than Mohamed Bamba's, if that makes sense. Mohamed Bamba's ceiling is higher. So that's the thing that makes ranking these guys kind of tricky is you have to look at the percentile outcome. Like what's the percentage likelihood that a guy reaches his ceiling? A lot of it's going to come down to Bamba. Like you said, Gobert was an outlier worker. Bamba's incredibly smart. I think he's going to pick up on concepts really quickly, but just how much work he's going to put in to improve his body and improve his skill level, because those things are imperative.
Yeah, mean versus median is a pretty big difference there too. Like the mean of Mohamed Bamba, the average outcome of Mohamed Bamba is higher. The median outcome of Miles Bridges, I can see you making a case that that's higher, actually.
Yep.
Let's move on. Let's talk your favorite prospect in this class, Jaren Jackson Jr. Do you have him at number 1?
2.
So Jaren Jackson Jr. for me is the best defensive prospect in this class. And going back through tape kind of made me remember why that is, because he is a legitimate like 1 through 5 switch guy who also had a better block rate than Mohamed Bamba this year, who is more reactive instinctually than Bamba is. He has to be because he doesn't have the outlier length. He does have really good length. He has like a 7'5" wingspan, but it's not outlier length like Mohamed Bamba does with like a +10 wingspan. What I will say about Jackson that mutes my excitement just a tiny bit compared to you, and why I have him at 4 versus number 2, is the offense and the feel on that side of the floor. But let's talk about him as a defender first, because again, for me, best defender in this class. And I think that like some of the comparisons to Serge Ibaka, even as a defender, underrate what he is as a defender already.
Oh, I totally agree with that. I look at him, and to me, he looks like the kind of 5 that would be in a title team. As far as anchoring and quarterbacking your defense, he can play on both levels. He's highly instinctual. I love his competitive fire defensively. As far as his engagement level, like he makes mistakes, like technical mistakes, all young bigs do, but he's ultra focused. He's already so technical in like his stance and how he plays pick and roll coverages. He's the youngest big in this class. I mean, that bears mentioning. He's a year and a half younger than Mohamed Bamba is. Like, that is really imperative here because he's already improved this season. I saw the improvement even in the passing arena. I agree with you. His decision making isn't great. We'll get to that, but there is just so much upside here that I think is not being realized because he doesn't have this, crazy wingspan. But when you watch the tape, like you said, it just pops off the screen. This guy, like, who's the last big that defended this well in college? Like Embiid or Anthony Davis? It's been a while for me.
I think he's better than Embiid was in college, to be honest. Like, I really do.
Yeah.
There's like a lot of, he's a more toolsy Jordan Bell. Like he like Jordan Bell was really good last year. Defensively was really, really good. Jordan Bell is also 6'8" with like a 6'11" wingspan and like an 8'9" standing reach. Jaren Jackson has that kind of ridiculous athleticism, has probably better feel than Jordan Bell does, and is center size with like a 9'2.5" standing reach and a 7'5" wingspan. Defensively, you can run whatever defensive scheme you want in screens. You can run whatever defensive scheme you want, switching on and off ball. Just the versatility of options he's going to allow you as a center is so high, and it's so valuable in today's ecosystem from a player like Jaren Jackson that he is going to be just an unbelievable role player at that level. Just absolutely unbelievable. He fit right into a scheme defensively, playing the 4, the 5, wherever Michigan State and Tom Izzo threw him, next to Nick Ward, next to Gavin Schilling, as a center next to Miles Bridges. It didn't matter. He just tied everything together this year.
And I think what's so important about defensive bigs in the modern game and just in the history of the league are guys that have mental consistency. They bring it every night, because that's kind of half of what defense is, right? It's just reacting quickly, but it's also just having that approach to where you're just a high-level, intense defender. Like a Kevin Garnett, that guy brought it all the time. Draymond Green, you see that currently. I'm not saying that Jaren Jackson's going to be those guys necessarily, but I don't think I've seen a prospect that mirrors that more than Jaren Jackson. So I think he can be a multi-year defensive player of the year candidate, frankly, at his ceiling. He's that damn good on that side of the ball. And for me, I always look at defense first with bigs. That's what I want to know. Can you protect the rim? How quickly do you react to situations? Are you communicating? Are you running and orchestrating things? Can you play on the perimeter in the modern game? He just answers all of those questions.
He is basically the opposite of Marvin Bagley in like every way, right?
Basically.
It's kind of funny. We'll get to Bagley in a minute, but I want to talk about Jaren Jackson offensively now. I don't want to say I'm not sold on him as a jump shooter. Like, I think he's going to be able to shoot threes. I am hesitant in comparison to a lot of people on Jaren Jackson's jump shot, because he does get great arc under the ball. And for people who don't know, like, people who get great arc under the ball tends to have like a greater cross section of potential outcomes with which it can go through the basket. I'm worried about the low release point and like the push shotty nature of it for a guy that's 6'11", who takes a lot of shots off of like a, standstill circumstance.
I'm worried about the functionality of the shot as far as how many ways he can utilize it. He's not Anthony Davis. Like, he's not going to dribble, pull up you or cross you up, shoot on the move over the top of guys. That limits his offensive upside because he's not going to be like a self-creator that way. But if he has time and space, he's got a quick release. And, I think he was over 40% on NBA threes this year as far as at Michigan State. I trust his shot. He's always shot well. Like someone with the mechanics are wonky, but you go back to AAU play, you go back to high school, he's always shot the ball well from three. Like he just has that touch, even though he doesn't get great rotation on the ball. It's just one of those things where it doesn't look great, but it goes in. And the fact that he's always done that just gives me a little bit more certainty. But I agree as far as the functionality goes. That's going to limit his ability to like shoot over the top in the mid post. Like a Deandre Ayton can reverse pivot you and shoot over the top. Jaren Jackson's more of like a stretch five. Like he's going to either pick and pop for three or he's going to be spaced out to three. But I do trust him, especially at the five position. Like look at how many fives get wide open looks in the playoffs. Like most of the time teams just don't care. And I think that they have to care about Jaren eventually, and that's going to open up his ability to attack closeouts.
But what I will say though is if you're using a top like 3 pick on someone, which is like, you know, what we're talking about with Jaren Jackson realistically, you do want a guy who can create late in the shot clock, right? And right now I don't see that with him. I don't see the ability for him to get a reasonable shot late in the shot clock.
I mean, if I'm using a top 3 pick and I can get a multi-year potential defensive player of the year for a big, I'm doing it. I guess that's the difference. Like for me, it's like the primary creators in the league, the very good ones, are like a once in a draft kind of player. So if you're looking at overall, like, is DeAndre Ayton going to create, like self-create at a high level at the end of the shot clock? He can get his shot. Marvin Bagley can get his shot. If they're going to be good enough doing that to offset the difference that Jaren Jackson brings defensively, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, and look, like this stuff is nitpicky with Jaren Jackson, right? Like all of these guys, I think this stuff is largely nitpicky once we get up to a situation where we're talking about top 4 players. I am worried about that. You are a big fan of his ball handling ability, correct?
Yeah, I think it's really underrated, man.
I think it's underrated. I think that he can be a guy that maybe can create a little bit going toward the basket. I think he has a pretty quick first step to get some space and get some separation going toward the basket. I don't think he's ever going to be like a pull-up guy, though.
Yeah, I'm concerned about the pull-up for sure. I don't think he has that functionality in his shot. Maybe with time and space he can get the balance, but I think that's far down the road. I'm not even really projecting that in like even his median outcome. That's more of like a higher end ceiling outcome. But man, he can handle the ball really fluidly for his size. I think he can actually face a guy up and take him off the bounce to the rim. He's not super explosive, exploding through contact, and that's one of his issues is around the rim. He doesn't explode through guys like a Bagley or an Ayton. He's not that level of athlete vertically. But as far as just a face-up setting, especially attacking closeouts, I think he's going to kill in those settings. If he can really shoot the ball and you have to close out hard to him like a more immobile 5, he's going to blow right past him. The question is, can he make the right read in those settings? Because that is the key. Can he quickly process? Because he started showing that a little bit this year. Like in the Minnesota game, if you saw that game, he was passing on the move. He's super unselfish. And why I'm high on his offense is like he's wired the right way. Like he just does things that I like. He doesn't just settle for mid-range shots every time. Like when he has space, he's going to put the ball on the floor. He's going to try to pass. If he has an open lane, he's going to get to the rim. So I just like the way he's wired. But there are definitely concerns about his offense overall.
Yeah, the way that he processes things scares me a little bit. He was very turnover prone. He had like I swear like 4 or 5 like inbound turnovers this year. Like where he was just inbounding the basketball, didn't see where someone was and passed it right to the other team or passed it out of bounds. I will say that I think the 17.4 turnover rate that he has is a bit higher than what it looks like, or like it's not as bad as what that number indicates, because a lot of his turnovers this year were moving screens that he won't get called for, or like off-ball fouls trying to establish position where, you know, he was just bigger and stronger than the other guy, and Big Ten officials aren't very good. So like the 17.4 number doesn't particularly scare me. He's just not a great decision maker in the way that he quickly functions and quickly processes what's happening around him. I
totally agree with that. It's worth noting, though, that he did cut down his turnovers in conference play, and that resonated on tape. Like when he started the year, he had a bunch of charges. Like he was just driving right into guys. He was missing pass outs. But I thought as the year progressed, he got a little bit better there. I was kind of impressed. He's not Wendell Carter as far as quickly, and I think Wendell Carter is honestly the only big in this class that really quickly reads plays, like truly reads them. The best part about this class is outside of Bamba, like Ayton and Bagley can both pass. Like if they have the play in front of them, value their passing. I think that all of these guys have the coordination to do that. It just comes down to like being unselfish. But yeah, I totally agree. As far as if you make Jaren Jackson make decisions, he's not Draymond Green.
So, and then the last thing that I do want to bring up that scares me, actually, there are two more things. I'm sorry. And the only reason I'm doing this is, again, to nitpick. Like, I think Jaren Jackson is an incredible prospect. He's awesome. He's unbelievable. He's 18 years old, doesn't turn 19 until right before the NBA season. This dude is a stud. Having said that, what do you think of his body control? Because there are times where he gets very, like, kind of gangly and all over the place, and he takes falls that like Marvin Bagley never really takes. Like Marvin Bagley, I think the most underrated part of his skill set is his body control. I think it's just absolutely incredible. Jaren Jackson, especially on offense, defensively, it's not as bad because it's, you know, he's either sliding in place or just kind of reading and reacting to guys going up for shots at the rim. But offensively, when he has to, you know, attack a closeout, I think he kind of doesn't have great body control.
I think he does as a ball handler. When he gets to the rim, that's a different issue. And I don't know if it's body control or I don't know if it's just general explosiveness. Like when he's in traffic, I see a lot of things I don't like, but I think that's a lot of that is explosiveness and just going through bodies in contact. He's not Marvin Bagley as far as flexibility goes. Like Bagley's a special dude as far as a finisher, man. Like that guy can bend. Like most guys can't do that at that size. Like I don't think that Jaren is like outlier bad. I think he's fine. But yeah, I agree with you. I don't think that he's like a high level finisher.
Yeah, and just even going up to try and score at the basket or trying to create separation for after he's attacked to close out. He can handle it a little bit, but it's a little bit mechanical whenever he handles the ball too. Like it's not like he has the body control to read the way the defender is leaning. It's, you know, right, crossover left, crossover right, gets a step and goes. You know, like he's not like, I don't think he's even like reading the hips of a defender really.
I don't know, man. Like I think I'm definitely higher in his body control as far as fluidity as a ball hitter. Like he's done some really impressive things this year that you just don't see 6'11", 7-foot guys do. Not just the highlights, but he does it a lot more consistently than you think. He's not just a straight line guy. I think he has enough coordination to actually beat you both ways. So I agree with you as far as body control at the rim for sure. But as a natural handler, I actually think that he is pretty adept there. He's not Anthony Davis. Nobody has those kinds of guard skills for the most part. But I think that he's definitely a plus in that capacity. If you compare him to all centers in the league, he's in like the 75th percentile, at least to me.
Don't know if I'd go that high, but I'd say he's above the 50th percentile. For
Fair
sure.
enough.
Last thing here. Does the 19.7 defensive rebounding rate scare you?
The rebounding scares me a little bit. I think that that's a fair point. I tend to devalue rebounding and just being earnest about how I analyze prospects.
I agree with you.
So I kind of tend to do that. I don't look at it, but it's a concern. I mean, his instincts aren't great there. He doesn't box out all the time. He usually tries to be physical, but sometimes, you know, it's just not there for him. He moved around by other guys like Ethan Happ can put a shoulder into him, drop it, and then move him off his spot. He's going to have to add core strength. I think that's the key with him because you want him to keep his mobility. Like he has to keep his mobility. So if you can add like core strength to his body where he can take these blows and just be able to anchor better leverage, that's going to be the key. But I agree with you. The rebounding's a little bit of a concern.
I enjoyed playing devil's advocate to your Jaren Jackson love. That was very fun.
Hey, it's my turn now.
Oh, yes, it is. Jaren Jackson, though, again, incredible prospect, I think. Top 4 prospect. No real qualms about him being in the second tier of players in this draft. Like, again, best defensive prospect in this class to me. Legitimate potential defensive player of the year in the league. Just a very, very, very good player.
Yeah, and I'll say this when we get to Luka as well. For me in this draft, this is a very subjective take, but I see 2 championship-level players in this class, and that's Luka Doncic and Jaren Jackson, if they both hit their ceiling. I think that they are the kinds of players that you see on championship-level teams. So that's why I have Jaren Jackson number 2.
I will say this. If Jaren Jackson is your number 1 guy, you're probably not competing for a title.
Oh, I'm not saying he has to be the number 1 option. I'm saying that he's the most likely 5 in this class to me comfortably that I would see on a title team. I'm not saying like as a creator or whatnot, but just as your 5 man, that's the guy.
Okay. Marvin Bagley, number 3. I think that a lot of people are just overthinking the Bagley thing. 21 points, 11 rebounds, 61% from the field, 39.7% from 3. ACC player of the year as a freshman 18-year-old. I mean, he's really good at basketball. Like, Marvin Bagley is just very, very good at basketball.
I mean, absolutely. You're not going to get a counter from me as far as production goes. I can't dispute, points and rebounds, athleticism, finishing. He's a great finisher.
Like 99th percentile athlete at his size in the NBA. I think that athleticism tends to play up at the NBA level, especially when you get out into space, when you get into situations where he can attack a closeout. I think he's an excellent ball handler at his size. Like you mentioned, great flexibility, great finishing ability around the basket. All of that stuff is going to go well. The most underrated thing about his game, though, I think, is the thing that we talked about with Jaren Jackson a minute ago that I don't really like. I think that Bagley has incredible body control for a player his size. Like, can't really remember a guy who is 6'11" who has that kind of body control where he can throw the ball up off the glass, know exactly where it's going to go, stop, second jump, go get it. Quick twitch athlete with second jump ability, third jump ability, reads plays and reads the ball off the glass incredibly well. Just a very, very adept basketball player in terms of his control and explosiveness combination.
Yeah, athletically, I mean, as far as flexibility, explosiveness around the rim especially, I'm a little lower on his handle than most people seem to think, or his general rapport is. Like, I would put him and Jaren Jackson easily on the same level as far as ball handling. And I know that's kind of a controversial take. No way. I totally think so. Honestly, like watching them all year face up.
But there's a difference though. Like Marvin Bagley Marvin Bagley was their number one option. Jaren Jackson was their fourth option. Bagley was blown by guys like Theo Pinson, whereas like Jaren Jackson's blown by like white dudes from Illinois.
Was he though? I don't remember Bagley blowing by many guys that wasn't like an advantage situation. Like normally, and what sucks about Bagley in this respect is he's predictable because everybody knows he's going back to that left, right? So if you're facing up, you know what he's going to do. Like, he's not going to go to his right hand. He's always going to come back over that right shoulder. So I think that's going to impact him a little bit. Maybe it did in college, but I didn't see the high-level ball handling. Like, if he plays the 5, absolutely. He's going to kill everybody. Like,
I think he's a 5, first and foremost. We can talk about that, too.
Yeah, so if that's the context we're putting this in, and he's a 5, yeah, and especially on closeouts, like, good luck. Like, he's agile enough to beat guys in space for fun, and then, to the body control, he can, like, double pump you at the rim and adjust around the basket. The finishing is there. The flexibility is there. I love him in that role. If you could promise me that he'd play the Amari Stoudemire role in the NBA, he's a high-level offensive player. Like, we're talking about one of the elite offensive bigs in the league. I
think that's what he is, basically. Like, I think he's Amari Stoudemire in the NBA. You would probably rather have what you think Jaren Jackson is than Amari, though, right?
Yes, for multiple reasons. And the first is that I don't think Marvin Bagley's going to play the role in the NBA that I want him to.
That's a good question. Why not?
I don't know if any coach is going to trust him as the 5 defensively. I just don't. Like, I mean, maybe in the playoffs when you downsize and you switch everything, he's going to play some 5. But like, as far as just most consistent minutes, I don't see him ever starting at the 5 consistently in the regular season. We've seen even GMs come out. Ryan McDonough came out and said he mostly sees him as a 4. He can downsize, kind of the Dragan Bender treatment where he can play the 5, but he starts at the 4, and that's going to make his life harder. I mean, like I said, I think we're seeing this through the same lens if he's in a specific position, but I don't know if that position is realistic.
It's an interesting point because I think that he is still like 19 years old and is going to continue to fill out and put on enough weight and put on enough power throughout his lower half, particularly to where he is going to be able to play the 5. I do understand your point though. I think it's very valid that there are worries there as to how a coach would handle him, but I think we need to kind of give people more credit than we are. Does that make sense? Like, we're kind of just saying, like, these people are going to fuck up how they handle Marvin Bagley.
Well, I mean, you look historically and how many times has a player like this really thrived in a high-level winning setting, and it's only really one. It's Amari Stoudemire with the Suns, and that team was like the most atypical team we've seen outside of the Warriors. Like, they defined a generation as far as having the personnel. Like, Steve Nash is the playmaker. Sean Marion's one of the most unique players that we've seen over the last 20 years as a 4. So I look at Bagley and I'm like, what is the likelihood of him ending up in a setting like that really just completely optimizes his offense, and maybe you switch everything defensively or whatnot and play to his agility strengths there? I just don't think it's that high. I think teams are going to play him at the 4. he's going to play some 5 as far as when they downsize, but as far as fully optimizing him, I just don't see it because defensively, he can't protect the rim. He doesn't have the reach to do that, and he doesn't have the physicality as far as that goes against most centers. I just don't think he's more of a 4 to me as far as build. Like, he's a little bit leaner as far as his build. You think he can add considerable strength? I think that's a fair argument. I'm not as sure, but he just doesn't have the physical tools, man. Like, the reach isn't there, and we have to put it in context historically and say how many guys like him have really thrived in that role. There just hasn't been enough examples for me to feel confident in.
Yeah, I think that stuff is fair to an extent. What I would say to that, though, is, the Suns defined a generation, right? Isn't that generation that they defined, like, now just moving toward what they did 10 years before everyone else did?
It could be, and to a certain extent, but you look at a lot of the young bigs in the league, and they're bigger. I mean, the size is coming back a little bit.
Yeah.
Again, I think that for your board, I mean, this is your board, so this is what you would do, right? So that's a factor in this calculus too. It's like not really basing it so much. It doesn't have to be based in reality. It's like, if I take Marvin Bagley 3, I'm going to play him this way, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, why is playing him at the 5 any different than playing Kevin Love at the 5?
I mean, that's true. I mean, Cavaliers defense is bad, so maybe they just trade off defense for offense, and I think you can optimize a guy like Kevin Love there because you have LeBron to get him all the looks when he does pop, and that's a setting that, it's analogous to this.
Yeah,
I would agree with that.
Or like Brook Lopez. Like, Brook is way bigger and stronger and powerful than he is, but like, it's not like Brook's out here defending the rim at a high level.
Yeah,
and,
I agree.
Like LaMarcus Aldridge too. The other thing is too, like, I don't think it's a disaster if he plays the 4, because I think that he's going to be able. The other thing that I think he's going to be able to shoot it too. And you don't think he's going to shoot it, right?
No, I'm relatively confident he'll shoot it reasonable level, but I don't think it's going to be Kevin Love, and that's why Kevin Love plays the 5 is because he's going to shoot it off movement and everything. Like, he's one of the most rare players at that position in the league, and like comparing him to Aldridge and stuff, all those guys are bigger and they're longer, and I just think they instill the confidence of the coach there to play him in those positions. But yeah, we're seeing this eye to eye as far as how we're projecting his game. Maybe defensively, you might be a little bit higher on him than me.
Yeah, real quick on the offense. Real quick. LaMarcus Aldridge isn't that much bigger than he is. Like, when LaMarcus was coming out of Texas, like, he's not that much bigger. I
mean, his wingspan is what, like 7'4"? Like, he's longer.
Yeah, I think it's like 7'3", 7'4". I think Bagley's wingspan, now that he's like 6'11", between 6'11" and 7 foot, is going to come in at like 7'2". Because it's always been +2. It's never been like plus 0.75 or whatever. It's always been +2.
Did you see the picture that some of the Kings fans uploaded where they had him, Bagley, they took a picture of him standing next to Peja Stojakovic, and he was actually like a little bit shorter. Like, I've always been of the opinion that Bagley's more like 6'10", or like,
you think so?
That size. Yeah, I mean, I obviously don't know. Like, I saw him standing next to Michael Porter. They look pretty identical in size. I'd say maybe 6'10" and a half, but yeah, I mean, the 7'1.5" wingspan that he's listed at, I believe, that looks real on tape. Like, I don't see him looking any longer than that. Does that make sense? Yeah.
He plays smaller than like 6'11". Like, yes. I don't really have a problem saying that, especially defensively. He plays smaller than 6'11". The other thing, though, is that there are like other analogous types to him than just, Amari Stoudemire. I think Amari is the most common one, but like Blake Griffin, when Blake came into the league, very similar in terms of the way he attacked the basket, could handle in space, could really attack the offensive glass, and continue to develop everything else around his game. LaMarcus Aldridge, I think, again, kind of a similar guy coming out of Texas in comparison to Marvin Bagley, physically, athletically, everything like that. Bagley is a step up on those guys in terms of ball handling, potential to shoot it, we will say. Same boat as those guys, maybe even a slight step ahead, but I'm not like going to full on like say, he's going to be the elite mid-range shooter that LaMarcus Aldridge is. Like, I think the offense is not really like questionable. Right? Like, he's an unbelievable offensive player.
I don't think he's anything near as coordinated as the ball handler as Blake Griffin was. I watched their tape back, and Blake is just so ridiculous. Like in short area.
Oklahoma?
Yeah, even in Oklahoma, like the spin moves and stuff that Blake has in tight confines. Like, I like Bagley in the open court. You see some crossovers. He's good there. Like, at the 5 role again. And Blake has played the 4 his entire career. Like, he can get away with it because he's so skilled. I don't see Bagley with that kind of skill level. He is skilled for a player of his size, no question. But he's not an outlier skilled guy like Blake. Blake is like through the roof, man. Like, his passing, his reads, his dribbling ability in tighter spaces. Like, he can catch on a short roll, double spin move you with like 2 guys right near him. Like, I think he's a special guy, man.
Yeah, the Blake like in small spaces stuff is definitely true, but Bagley is a lot better even in half court in like bigger open spaces. He's like, I see Bagley more as like a spot up attack guy. Who might be able to like take guys in the post occasionally and in the mid post, but like that's more where I'm excited about him. Like I'm excited you get him out into space. I think he's gonna be able to shoot threes and just be able to attack off the closeout the entire time.
Okay, we're eye there as far as that goes. I think that as a closeout attacker, as a face-up guy beyond three, I think that he has enough handle depending on who guards him. Like if he has a bigger combo guy on him, I'm kind of scared. Like I don't think he has enough handle and enough ability to get around somebody like that. But if you're closing out hard to him, yeah, absolutely.
Telling you, go back and watch that North Carolina tape, man, especially second half again in their second game of the year, I believe it was. Whenever they had that crazy run, he can do some stuff against like smaller guys like Theo Pinson, again, an elite level defender at North Carolina in college. Yeah, defensively, I'm worried. I'm not going to lie to you. Not a rim protector, but I think he's going to be able to defend in space. I think that he is going to be able to learn technique. And I think he's going to be able to be a switch guy 1 through 5.
Okay, here's my counter to that. And I agree, that's his best skill as far as his agility. How many good switch guys do you see in the league with his wingspan? Like, he's not Capella. He doesn't even move as well as Capella does, frankly. And Capella's 7'5" wingspan.
Oh, man. Yeah.
Like,
he definitely moves as well as Clint does.
I don't think so. No, like Clint, like maybe as a prospect. I don't remember Clint as a prospect, but not right now. There's no way. Like, Clint has, like, legitimate twitch, and the 7'5" wingspan erases so much. Like, so much of contesting shots is the length. Like, you watch the Boston College game this year, and it wasn't just technique with Bagley. It was like they could just, like, I think Kai Bowen was just giving him like a jab step and shooting right over the top of him because most bigs can't hang. Like, Kevin Love has a decent wingspan. He can't hang. Of course, Bagley's more mobile than Kevin Love. I'm just saying that overall, a lot of the blocks and a lot of the contests come in like recovery situations. So if Clint gets a half step, if he gets beat by a half step, that length erases that. If Bagley gets beat at all, like, he has no recovery length. Like, what does he do? Like, I know that one block against Florida that everybody plays against their point guard. It's like NBA athletes are way faster than that. They're getting to the rim. That's already a done deal. I do think that the point is valid. Like, over time, if he had some strength, I also don't think he's as strong as like a Julius Randle, for example, but the agility is there to switch. Like, that's the kind of scheme I would run if he's playing the 5.
Yeah, so my counter to that is that Marvin Bagley, you and I have talked about this. Marvin Bagley was coached by his dad for like 3 years. And, good for Marvin Bagley Jr., I believe it is, getting a chance to, coach an AAU team and get the rewards that come with coaching an AAU team. Well, let's just kind of call it what it is. It's still his dad coaching him, like in a relatively unstructured circumstance like AAU basketball. Then he went to Duke. Duke doesn't really... Like, when was the last time Duke had a great defense in terms of man-to-man, right? You might be able to point to the Jahlil Okafor year statistically, but that team was a mess defensively for 3/4 of the year and then turned it on at the last minute in the NCAA tournament. You look since 2012, Duke's defensive rating, 79th, 26th, 86th, 86th, 79th, 26th, 86th, 11 the title year when they were bad for until March, basically, and then 86-47, and then 9th this year when they played the zone. So, like, it's not like Duke is sitting here teaching great man-to-man fundamentals.
Oh, you're not getting an argument from me as far as technique. I said his technique sucks, but I think that's improvable. I think he can do that in the pros.
And I think once his technique improves, he's so quick twitch, he's so agile, he's so athletic that, like, I don't think he's gonna he's gonna need the recovery length, obviously, whenever he's going up against, someone like Chris Paul, who's gonna be able to get by anyone his size. But I also don't think that, I think he's a much quicker player than Clint Capella. That ability to get down in a technique and get down in a stance, as he gets more comfortable with that, I don't think that just simple jab step stuff is going to work as well. I think he's going to be fine in terms of getting more on balance and getting to a place where he's more comfortable.
I'm worried about him against pull-up threats, man. I think if he has to play close to you, I don't think he's agile enough. Again, if they get a half step on him, he's done. He has no recovery length. It's over. So against some matchups in the league with these elite point guards, I'm worried. In like a 1-5 switch setting, I don't think he's going to be able to hang. I think that length is the most important thing for switch defenders right now. I mean,
here's my thing, raising my hand again. We talked about this last podcast. How many young point guards are there in the league right now?
Okay, fair point. You're using my own point against me. That's fair. I'm saying this long term. I agree with the technique stuff, even though I think sometimes we assume that people can just learn these things and they'll be good at them. You know what I mean? Like, they'll learn to mirror guys.
100% what I'm doing here. Yes, absolutely.
I'm saying, like,
no argument.
do guys like always learn the ability to mirror quickly on the ball? That's a tough skill. Even the most elite athletes, sometimes they just can't do it. Like, it's a precise ability to do that. I think that like Sindarius Thornwell is really good at this. There's other guys like Kenrich Williams in this class is really good. He doesn't have like the best athleticism, but that dude knows how to move his feet and react to you. Can Bagley learn that stuff? Sure. I just don't know how highly I'd bet on it. The only thing I don't like about his space defense, again, well, there's two things. It's the strength. The technique, well, yeah, three things. The technique, I think that's improvable. The length, I don't think that's improvable, obviously. I think that's going to be a problem. The strength, that's like the gray area thing for me, because like, he gets some Julius Randle comparisons. He's definitely a better vertical athlete, no question. But as far as build, like Julius has a really ridiculous frame. Like that guy can morph his frame from like 6 months to the next. And his strength level, ability to hold up against contact when defenders drive into his body, I think that's a really imperative skill set to Julius. And I'm not saying that Bagley has to be Julius to be an effective switch defender. Those two areas, if he can't add enough core strength and he doesn't have the length, I don't think he's going to be as effective as guys think he is as like this 1 through 5 switch guy, even though he has the agility.
Yeah, no, Randall is so strong. Like, even at prep levels, Julius Randle was one of the strongest dudes you would come across. I don't think he's Julius Randle at all. I do think, though, that you're right on the strength stuff if that does not come through. I'm assuming that it's going to come through because I tend to bet on dudes that are like 18 years old, just getting stronger. You know what I mean? Like, it just kind of is what it is. But you know what? If it does not come through, I think it's fair.
And I think that's improvable. Obviously, the technique and the strength can be improved. I think there's one damning area here, though, we haven't touched on. Not just the rim protection. It's the reaction time. I don't know if that ever comes to you, as far as that ability to initially diagnose the play and react.
Yeah.
And honest to God, like Bagley might be one of the worst defensive bigs I've ever seen at this. And I don't know how much is effort or how much is just he just stands still for an extra second and then he's too late to recover. You know what I mean? Like, I think that can make up and compensate for a lack of length if you just immediately react to things. Jaren Jackson's incredible at this. Wendell Carter's even pretty damn good at this. Bagley has the athleticism. He has the pop as far as protecting the rim from the weak side. Absolutely. But can he react quickly to plays? Does he keep his head on a swivel on team defense? I think that's so imperative.
I agree with you to an extent on that. I think you in general tend to be pretty hard on super young defenders doing this. Like, not everyone's Jaren Jackson. Like, I think you've been spoiled this year by Jaren Jackson just being a freak at this.
There's no question about that, dude. I can't analyze things anymore the right way, apparently. So
like, and this is something we'll talk about with Deandre Ayton too. Like, DeAndre, I think, as a 4-man who got stuck playing the 4 this year and had those responsibilities, he got caught looking a lot in tape that like makes him look worse than what the actual responsibility was, I think, on his part. Like in Duke's case, for instance, like Trey Duval, Gary Trent, Grayson Allen, atrocious on the perimeter and man-to-man this year. Would you agree?
No question.
Like, really, really bad this year. And the problem is that it puts the onus on typically the 5-man to rotate over and help. Sometimes, though, it's the 4-man, and it's not an immediate reaction for those guys, I think, a lot of the time, because they're coming all the way from the weak side, whereas most of the time the 5-man is just coming from like halfway to the weak side. You know what I mean? And it's a situation where like you have to decide, okay, I'm probably going to foul this guy. I probably shouldn't go, or like I'm going to go for it and take the foul.
You're stretching here.
A little. I really don't think I am. Like, I'm telling you, you go back and watch Deandre Ayton, you go back and watch Marvin Bagley. Like, Bagley's worse at this than Ayton is, for sure. Bagley is not. I would say DeAndre is on like a different tier than Bagley is in terms of reaction time defensively. But I do really think that part of this is that the perimeter defenders at the point of attack in both of these situations just got blown by so tremendously and so regularly that it made the help defense look bad just kind of by like comparison too.
100%. Yeah, there's no question that they weren't done any favors by the perimeter defense from their team. But again, it's like if a guy does drive the lane and you don't react to the action at all, you don't do anything. You're just kind of stuck in limbo. Like Bagley so many times would be caught in between, like helping to the weak side corner for 3 and just basically in no man's land. You know what I mean? If I'm describing that right. And there would be no reaction to either side. It would just be standing there. And obviously he's never been coached defense at a high level. I think that's pretty clear. It's just, for me at least, I look for some kind of instinctual framework, like just a foundation as far as a guy who, you know, he at least Bagley tries, especially on offense. Like, I think he's a high motor guy. That's his biggest selling point for me, is that guy's going to work his ass off. So that's why I still like him. But he's just not wired to do this stuff. And I'm of the mindset that you don't just learn this stuff. Some of this stuff comes naturally. Like, look at Marquise Chris on the Suns. And I'm not comparing him as far as overall prospect to Bagley. I'm just saying.
Oh boy, this is not unfair.
Yeah, I'm just saying these high-level athletes that just don't. And Bagley's played basketball for longer. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing in this case, but I just don't know. For me, it's just a question mark. I can't depend on him to make rotations in a timely manner and react to things quickly. And I think at the highest levels of play, if you get to play, let's not use the Warriors, just a really high IQ team that moves the ball, I think they're going to prey on that dude because they're going to know, like, if they run an off-ball action, they can hunt him off the ball, and that's what I'm worried about.
Yeah, I tend to just give dudes who are super productive and super athletic the benefit of the doubt. I might be wrong. I'm okay on that one. Like, honestly, that is most of it. Like, I am just willing to bet on super productive, super athletic dudes.
Sure.
Marquise Chris was not like hyper productive like Bagley was.
Oh, yeah.
And you're not, I know
100%.
You're not comparing the two, but like, I'm just kind of willing to bet on a dude that had that kind of nose for the ball, that had that kind of motor mentality, athleticism, touch, everything at a higher level. And honestly, like, I just kind of think offense matters more than defense. I mean, even as a big man, like, just give me the offensive guy. And hopefully when they're 19 years old, when basically no one who's 19 years old, unless you're Jaren Jackson, can defend at like a super high level instinctually, I just hope you can learn it. I really do.
And that's fair. I mean, that's a fair position to have. I'm just more concerned about it.
Yeah, it's hard. Now that our Marvin Bagley session, this is like the second time, by the way, we've gotten into like very strong words on Marvin Bagley. Like, we did like a whole Marvin Bagley podcast and just yelled at each other for like an hour. You should go back and find that. It's fun. He is the most polarizing prospect, I think. And I get why. I just tend to bet on dudes like that. Number 2 for me is Luka Doncic. I believe that Luka is number 1 for you, correct?
Yes, sir.
I will give you the floor. Tell me everything that you enjoy about Luka Doncic as an NBA prospect.
I'm going to start from a holistic kind of 30,000 feet view. How many times do we see a guy who's 6'8" with a high, like, elite level skill level as far as ball handling, shooting, we'll call it like sub-elite shooting, to be fair, and then elite level passing as far as in pick and roll, can hit that corner 3 shooter. He can make every read in the book. He can pass over the top of defenses, and he has that build. We've talked so many times in this podcast about the trade-off that you incur by playing a ball handler that's 6'1", like Trae Young. There's going to be an issue defensively. When you play a 6'8" guy, that reduces that trade-off. And there's just not a lot of guys that we've seen come in the league like Luka. I mean, there's nobody really to compare him to. People want to say James Harden. I'd be very surprised if he became the scorer that James Harden is. That's just James Harden's one of the best isolation players, if not the best of all time.
James Harden has won a scoring title. I do not think Luka Doncic is going to win a scoring title.
Yes. Very fair. But I think that a lot of his, I don't know when we want to get into this, but I think a lot of press suffers because there's just nobody really to compare him to. But overall, great size at 6'8", 6'9", for we'll call him a co-primary handler. He can play the wing, shoot off the dribble. His step back shot is something that a lot of guys never get in their arsenal. He has that at 19 years old. I think that is worth mentioning, is like, this guy can legit take 2 dribbles back, hit a 3 off the bounce. He can cross you up. RJ Barrett's learning that right now. He's trying to do that. We saw that at Hoop Summit, so that's just an entertaining aside. It's really hard to do that kind of stuff, and he has that in his game. But the most attractive thing for me is just basketball intelligence. I just think the guy really knows, he really feels the game at a high level, and you just don't see guys that are this functionally athletic as far as skill level. Like Lonzo Ball last year had the brain. He didn't have the handle or the shot, and Luka does. Yeah,
no, I think Luka is what everyone got really excited about Lonzo Ball being last year, right? We should go into the fact first and foremost that there has literally never been a European prospect like this dude. Just genuinely, from everything he has accomplished at this stage of his career. He is the EuroLeague MVP. He is the ACB League MVP. He is the EuroLeague Final Four MVP. He was 2 times All First Team ACB. 2-time ACB Young Player of the Year, 2-time EuroLeague Young Player of the Year, I believe, as well. Like, you can run through every single like aspect of a player's career. Like, some people are like, oh, well, look at Dragan Bender. He sucks now. Dragan Bender was playing like 300, 400 minutes at Maccabi Tel Aviv. Barely played any EuroLeague, if I remember correctly. Like Kristaps Porzingis, even. Like, Kristaps was a great prospect in large part because of physical tools and productivity. Kristaps averaged like 10 and 6, I think, at Sevilla before he came over. Sevilla was not even a EuroLeague team. Like, they were a solid Spanish league team. Just what Luka Doncic has accomplished at this stage, being the best player on a EuroLeague champion, winning MVP, he is the most accomplished teenager to enter the NBA or to like walk on earth in basketball, basically since Kobe Bryant made an NBA All-Star game in 1997.
Thank you for actually introducing that professionally and succinctly. I think that is the most important context here, is contextualizing just how special his production is overseas. It's just really, we've never seen something exactly like this. I mean, he's been playing professionally for 2 years over there as far as high level play in the ACB, and that's the second best league in the world. So what he's doing as a 19-year-old, I think sometimes that gets taken for granted by some people. I mean, he has his fans that will never let you forget how good he is about everything. But honestly, I think that sometimes that gets taken for granted. You see some of the skills, you see some of the moves, and it's like, okay, you're watching a 19-year-old play against some 30-year-old or 28-year-old professionals that are, EuroLeague, I don't know, all EuroLeague team. It's crazy.
Yeah, like he got his first ACB game in like 2015 when he was like 15 years old. Yeah, like he played like actual rotation minutes, not even like last year, but the year before that when he was 16 going into 17. He's just a ridiculous basketball player in every single way. And you mentioned like the skill set wise, that's the biggest thing that stands out to me is the polish. Great ball handler, great basketball IQ, unbelievable in the pick and roll. I think that's, the best place for him to operate in the NBA.
Yes.
He is an unbelievable pick and roll playmaker for both himself and for teammates. Having said that, like at first I kind of thought, like maybe you can play him as like the point guard in super big lineups and be super switchable and everything. I don't know if you want to do that. Like the more I watch him and the more I've gone back and like looked at all of the tape and everything, like every time that his teams, including Real Madrid, including Slovenia, have been super successful with him on the floor, he has had like a ball handler next to him. Like Facundo Campazzo is Real's guy right now that plays next to him for the most part. They tend to operate better when he's on the floor. They tend to operate better as Slovenia, obviously, when Goran Dragic is on the floor, because Dragic is absolutely unbelievable too. But like, I think that you are not necessarily in a situation where you're going to want to play him as the lead guy. You want him to be secondary pick and roll playmaker from the side, maybe, bring up a flex action. He takes the ball at the top of the key, runs a screen and roll, sees what develops. You know what I mean? Like, it's all that stuff.
I completely agree with that, honestly. And I think that the whole idea and concept of a lead guy, there's not many guys that have been able to do that in history, really. You wear down, like Harden can do that for sure, but you can't do that over, 100 games or 90 games in a season. You just wear down, especially in the playoffs. LeBron's the only guy I've ever seen that can do this consistently. Like, he doesn't really need help. You can put 3-and-D guys around LeBron, and he can run an offense. And that's the only guy I've ever seen. But I agree with you. I like when Luka is paired with another ball handler. Like, when you watch him playing for Slovenia, for Igor, compared to Real, I love the Slovenia version of Luka. I think that's how you want to use him. Get him the ball when he's already on the move sometimes. Like Real, too often, like he's in straight pick and roll and he's starting from a standstill. Like that negates his first step because he doesn't have a great first step, and that's not playing to his strengths. I like when he gets the ball off of an action where he's already moving. You can play to his strengths. So this is kind of a mistake I've made in the past as far as viewing like a primary guy strictly in terms of first step. This is all important stuff, by the way. I'm just saying, like, I think that we tend to overlook that you can use a guy like Luka in an ocean type thing where you can catch, like maybe late in the shot clock, he catches the ball coming around a pin down that goes into a pick and roll. He's already moving. That helps him. So I think that that's the advantage. You have to play to his strengths more.
Yeah, and like the other places where he's super successful is in handoff situations. Like he just runs up from a corner, takes a handoff from a big man who sets like a half a legal screen, and he just comes up and either gets into the lane or finds an open ball handler that way. He's really, really good at that too.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. I think that this kind of goes to the overall conceptual idea of Luka is that he's kind of safe to me on the wing. Like, if things don't work out for him as a primary ball handler, if he can't create the requisite space, even though I think he can because of his body and his way he handles and keeps guys in jail and pick and roll, for example. But in isolation, he's going to struggle a little bit. But off the ball as a wing, I think you can run him in these kinds of actions. We saw that with Slovenia. He can run off screens. He can run a secondary pick and roll. He can attack closeouts. He's actually got a decent first step on closeouts. He uses that jab step hard to sell it, and then he kind of cuts inside. So I like the fallback option with him because he can always partake in an offense because he's 6'8", he can dribble, pass, and shoot, and he can shoot off movement. So I think his baseline is really safe.
I agree with you. I think that he is going to step into the NBA and be a very real starter from day one. That's just kind of where we're at with Luka Doncic. Like, he is going to be very, very good basically immediately. I think you're talking like 14 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists. Immediately, basically. He's that skilled as a player. He's just that good. He's huge. You can play him 1 through 4, basically, if you want to. He's going to give you a lot of versatility. Let's talk about the downsides. First, sure. I would say that the athleticism is a concern. He does need to, I would say, stay in the shape that he's in now. Hopefully he gets better, but he at least needs to, like, not continue to put on a ton of weight. Because, like, midway through this year, before he took, like, 2 or 3 weeks off, like, midway through the year, I think it was, like, in February or March that he did that off the top of my head, you could see him start to slow down a little bit. Like, he was starting to get to the point where he wasn't getting the separation that he did early in the season and that he did in, like, later EuroLeague rounds as well. So I'm worried about the body and I'm worried about the athleticism going forward. He needs to prove that he's going to stay in good shape.
And as an extension of that, I do think he has some athletic upside as far as he's not in an NBA strength and conditioning program. He has the frame, but I think he has some upside to add maybe core strength, slim down a little bit, getting more of an athletic build. I think we can't rule that out as far as him adding like maybe 5% more athleticism. I think that's completely in the calculus. But like you said, you don't want him going the other way.
Yeah.
He can't become... Yeah,
well, the thing is there, though, like, I agree with you that it can go both ways. Like, yeah, he can add like 5 to 10% more athleticism. The thing that scares me is, like, I think the downside is way worse there. Because if you add 5 to 10% athleticism to him, he's still not like a hyper elite athlete. You know what I mean? But if you take away 5 to 10% athleticism, it's a big problem for him. Like, it is a significant issue, I think.
Is that like, how are you approaching this as far as you think something in his character would signify that he's not going to be a worker, or how are you approaching that?
Yeah, that's hard because you hear different things. You hear the fact that, you know, he's big on Madrid's nightlife because who wouldn't be? You hear that he is, you know, someone who likes fast food. You have to hope that as he gets past being 19 years old, that it becomes something that's fine. Honestly, he, in all likelihood, just given what his skill set is, given the way he is, will probably not be the same level star in America as he is walking around Madrid. You know, like, just realistically, especially as a rookie, even if he goes number 2, number 3, number 4 overall, probably not the same kind of thing.
It's hard to get to that level. I mean, just for the, I agree with you there. I think there is, I guess there's concern, and I you know, you keep seeing him mocked at 4. That's the only thing I can really think of, but I know I'm biased towards Luka as far as liking his fit in the modern game, but when you see him mocked at 4, sometimes even at 6, that's the only thing that makes sense for me is teams might be concerned about his ability to add athleticism and like ascribe to an NBA kind of diet, because I know that ESPN had that article about him not eating great and all that stuff. So assuming that stuff goes in the right direction, I do think there is athletic upside, and that's something that I don't think is really talked about with him. He's viewed as kind of as is, because a lot of unathletic skill guys, or I would say unathletic, he's okay as far as an athlete, but a lot of those guys are just kind of written off, and you look more like the athleticism guys. Like, the high-level athletes can improve skill level, right? But I also think that the high-level skill guys who aren't that athletic can improve their athleticism some. We've seen that with Jamal Murray, even Jason Tatum a little bit, even though that might have been tied to more of the injury his freshman year at Duke.
Yeah. The other thing, too, that I want to point out, part of this, I think, is just due to high-level usage as a 19-year-old. He has like a 17% turnover rate, and he makes some pretty piss-poor decisions from time to time.
Yep.
Be it, like one of the things that a lot of people have brought up recently is that, the cross-corner pass is one of the hardest passes to make in basketball, and he does it really well. He does it really well. He also throws the ball away quite a bit trying to make that pass. Like, he sees it, but he'll just throw the ball like 3 rows deep sometimes too.
Sure. 100%. And I think that goes to his age. It's like his real age, not like, playing like a 25-year-old veteran or stuff. He still makes young mistakes. No question. I see it a lot with defense, frankly. Like, he was kind of billed by a lot of the Euro guys as like a really high-level team defender. And you see that in spurts when he really applied himself, especially in like the Slovenia games. When he really tried, you could see it. Like, he's not a high-level quick twitch guy, but when he tries hard, I think he can be a salvageable defensive player. But I think I watched 16 Real games recently, and the defense was really underwhelming. And not just from a quickness standpoint, but from like a off-ball focus standpoint. They mostly hide him on the weak side. Yeah. He doesn't have a lot of responsibility, but like he got back cut a ton. He never boxes out. There's a lot of technical issues with him. He's not Lonzo Ball as a team defender. And I think that's what people correlate these high-level IQ guys. Lonzo's a more bouncy athlete, of course, but at UCLA, Lonzo was a good team defender, and Luka is not that consistently for Real.
Did you watch any 2016-17 tape, or was it all this year?
All this year.
Yeah, it was a little bit better last year. I will say that.
Good.
Like, as it was not, like, as his usage has gone up, I don't know if they've told him to kind of chill out or if he is just kind of taking mental breaks on the floor on defense, but it was better in 2016-17 than it was this year. It has not been good this year, I don't think. In terms of his overall ceiling, like, that's, I think, where I'm struggling with it, because I think his median outcome is higher than anyone else's. His mean outcome is higher than anyone else's in this draft, not named DeAndre Ayton. Do we think that he has like all-star ceiling? Like, do we think that he is, and I mean like real all-star ceiling, like making like 5 or 6 all-star games?
I do. Yeah, I really do think he has that. He has the skill level. I think he's going to ideally improve a little bit athletically. I don't think he needs much. I think he needs a little bit more because he can keep a live dribble. Like, I watched a lot of Joe Johnson tape, and he does this too. He didn't have the best first step. He wasn't like the most dynamic athlete, but that guy could really handle the ball. And Luka can do that too. He can keep guys on his back as far as in pick and roll. He can create separation that way. He already has a step back 3. So if he can just add a little bit of pop attacking the rim, he's a high-level decision maker, man. Maybe it doesn't equate to high-level scoring. That's usually what's equated with all-star games, right? Usually the high-level scorers get those accolades. But as far as a decision-maker and just general playmaker in the modern game, I think he has 20-point-per-game upside. I think he can get to 22 points or so. And the assists are going to be there. So the production, I think, is going to be there. And for me, it just comes down, again, to more, I view it not as an all-star context, but more as like your role on a title-level team, if that makes sense.
So you actually bring up the Joe Johnson thing. That's actually kind of interesting to me because they're both like kind of the same size, like 6'7", 6'8", not super athletic, either of them. Joe Johnson had a ceiling of, for however long he was in Atlanta. What was it? From age 24 to 30. So 7 years. Basically averaged like 21 points and like 5.5 assists a game. If that was to happen with Luka Doncic, would he be a disappointment?
I don't think so, but my parallel with Joe Johnson is more just stylistically, like the body is similar, the handling is similar, but like Luka's a much smarter basketball player. Like I don't think it's a question. I think he's going to be a better shooter, but that requires a little bit of projection, I guess, with the shot. But I don't think it's a disappointment, honestly. If that's I view that more as like his median outcome. Is something like that, is an iteration of Joe Johnson. Maybe not quite the scorer, but almost to that level. And I don't think it's a huge disappointment. That's still, if Luka shoots the ball off ball and he can space the floor competently from 3, that's still a valuable player. But ideally, yeah, if you're drafting in number 1, you want the ceiling to be higher than that. I think, yes.
I will say this. If he is Joe Johnson, the team that selects him should be ecstatic, I think. Okay. You get 7 years of that kind of production. That'd be great, I think.
Sure.
I think the ceiling is probably a little bit higher than that. Maybe not crazy higher than that, though. I am worried about him as a athlete, like kind of going forward as an athlete. I'm worried about him finishing at a super high level at an NBA clip. He gets to the foul line a ton, by the way. Like that is maybe his most underrated skill at this stage. He gets to the foul line like crazy because he's such a good technician with the ball. Defensively, you're talking about a guy who's probably going to be average, right? Like probably not a plus player. So if you're 20 points, 7 assists a game, average defender, that's a really good player. Like that is second best player on a title team good. And I think that that's what you're talking about, Luka Doncic. I think that if everything goes right, he can be that kind of guy.
Yeah, and I think he can create his own shot. Like maybe you get in a setting where he's, we've talked about this in the past. If it's a switch setting, you have 2 wings that are just they're quicker than him. He's going to have problems, but he still has the threat of a shot off the dribble. Those guys are always going to be valuable to me. Like you can't compare him to anybody in the modern game. Like Simmons initiates the offense for Philadelphia, much better athlete, of course, better burst, but he can't shoot it all. He has no threat of a shot. And I think that Luka is also a versatile player. Like you can play him even as the screener, maybe in pick and roll. You get a switch with a small onto him. He can post up. He has that kind of skill level. He can pass out of the post. Just a lot of diversity. And what I value the most about him is just as a general archetype, a guy who's 6'8", who has high skill level and can make decisions at a very high level. Every title team, this is my main takeaway with the Warriors. It's that you can't replicate that team, but you can replicate certain aspects of what makes them successful. And that's getting a bunch of smart guys on the floor that know how to play the game. If you can get guys who can shoot, who can pass and dribble, then do that, initiate your offense at times. That's why I see the value in him, because you're not incurring that high-level trade-off as far as I don't think guys are going to hunt him religiously in pick and roll. Maybe, as far as his foot speed. But, like, they don't usually hunt 6'8" guys that are, like, kind of more wings. Like, they'll hunt Kevin Love. But if Luka gets to the level of athlete that I think he can, which is just a smidge more, I don't think he's going to be that kind of player where teams are just going to go all out and try to pick on him.
Yeah, no, like I said, like I think he's just an unbelievable talent. And I have no problem having him in tier 1, number 2 overall for me. The thing with me is, like, DeAndre Jordan is incredible, I think. And we're not going to belabor DeAndre Jordan. We just talked about DeAndre like this month. We talked about him on June 5th, a week ago, basically. You want to go back and hear us argue about DeAndre Ayton for an hour? You can do that. But the thing that I just continue to come back to with DeAndre is that if everything goes right with him, if everything like breaks right from a physical perspective, from the mental acuity that I think he's shown defensively at times this year, that guy is like, I legit think he could be a top 20 player ever if everything broke right. I don't know if I see that with anyone else.
Well, you called him DeAndre Jordan twice starting this, so I know what he means to you now.
Did I say DeAndre Jordan?
You did. Yeah,
DeAndre
and then you corrected
Ayton?
and said DeAndre. Yeah. It's all good, man. Yeah, I
It's
mean,
been a long
I know where you're
podcast,
coming from.
man.
Yeah, dude, what are we on, like almost 2 hours?
Yeah.
I'm with you. I'm not with you as far as the ceiling. I'm with you as far as I understand where you're coming from with this.
Well, here, what do you think his ceiling is? That is kind of a good place to start, because what do you think he can be if everything goes right?
Everything. Okay, what are we saying with everything goes right? Like he becomes like miraculously like a really high level team defender, and he's like a high level defensive player. Is that like what we're talking about?
Yeah, like makes 1 or 2 all defense teams. Like I think that's the ceiling. Like not like a super elite level defender, but a very good defender.
Are we talking like peak DeAndre Jordan, Embiid, that kind of player?
Yeah, I think that not even Joel Embiid, because I think Embiid has surpassed anything that DeAndre Jordan was. But DeAndre Jordan, I think, is a good comp defensively for what I think he can be.
Okay, that's a pretty damn good comp. I think that DeAndre wasn't a great college defender, and he kind of improved enough to be a capable, or I would say a sub-elite, maybe NBA defender as far as for a big.
I think he was a really good defender for a long time. Not for a long time, but like from the time that Doc got there until even like this year, I think he was not great defensively, but still pretty good.
Okay, so if he gets to a sub-elite or very good level defensively, offensively, I'm going to ask you, what do you think his peak offensive value is? Like what do you...
26 and 12, probably, is his ceiling, right? Like he's going to be an unbelievable rebounder if he knocks down 34% of his threes and continues to be able to operate in the post like we know he can. It's probably like 26 and 12, right?
Okay. So how is he getting those points predominantly? That's what I'm curious about. Like, is he going to be an Anthony Davis kind of player where he's making shots off the dribble, you're pick and popping him, he's driving, he's getting to the rim? Like, how is he through the post? Like, how is he getting them?
I think you're going to be able to pick and pop him. I think you're going to be able to pick and roll him. Like, there's nothing about his skill set that says he can't be just an absolutely incredible pick and roll player, right?
I mean, I'm not as high on the shot, but if we're treating this as a ceiling outcome and it goes right and he does end up shooting, what percentage from three on volume? Let's assume he shoots from volume on three. What percentage are we looking at here? He's not going to be Towns. Let's write.
No. Yeah. Like 34%, 35%, I would say is the ceiling.
Yeah, I have a hard time. We've talked about this in the past as far as guys on title teams.
In terms of role threat though, like not as a pick and pop guy, but as a role threat. There's nothing about his skill set that can't be elite. He can be a pick and roll all the way to the basket finisher. He can be a short roll guy because he can pass it. Like, all of that is there.
Yeah, he has dual threat pick and roll ability at his ceiling for sure. Again, if you buy the shot at 34% on reasonable volume, it comes down to efficiency for me too, as far as how he gets his points. You're going to run your offense through him probably in pick and roll, correct? Or you can obviously utilize him in the post, but he's not going to be. Is he going to be Nikola Jokic, like where he's playmaking and like he's like the hub of your offense? Do you see him that way?
I think he's more the way that the Timberwolves use Towns, where they'll post him a lot. They will run pick and pops for him. They'll give him some mid post stuff, but he's not like an Anthony Davis taking dudes off the bounce kind of guy. Yeah,
see, and that's what I keep coming back to is...
And, like, by the way, Towns developed that handle really, like, a lot. Like, he's very, very good at attacking closeouts now.
Sure, but he was also, like, a perimeter player at lower levels, right? Before he got to Kentucky, like, Towns was more of a perimeter guy. Like, he would take guys off the dribble, too. Like, I think he had more...
What did we piss and moan about DeAndre Ayton? Oh, my God. What did we piss and moan about with DeAndre Ayton for years when he was at a prep level? That he stayed on the perimeter too long and stayed outside for too long.
Yeah, but he didn't dribble like Towns. I'm saying like Towns shot better and he dribbled better. So he developed those skills. I think that Ayton has it in his arsenal. I don't think he's going to beat Towns offensively. I'm just trying to figure out an attacking angle where I'm trying to figure out conceptually what this player looks like. Because the three best offensive bigs in the league are Nikola Jokic, Karl Towns, DeMarcus Cousins. Does he resemble any of those guys to you?
Yes, DeMarcus Cousins, I would say. There's a lot of DeMarcus Cousins there before DeMarcus learned to like really handle it.
Okay, so that's the differentiator for me is can Ayton learn to handle with that kind of fluidity? Because we talked about this in the past podcast. Like DeMarcus flashed that at Kentucky, but nothing like shooting off the bounce from three. Like DeMarcus can shoot a pull-up three. And he's 7 foot. That doesn't happen in the league very often. So.
Right, but like just kind of how we talked about with Blake Griffin being able to handle on the block and like spin like back shoulder, primary shoulder. Like DeAndre did that stuff this year.
Yeah, for sure. Like, there was some of that in his, but that's more of like to me, that's more of like a short roll thing where in short confined quarters, like he can double spin. He's definitely coordinated there. I'm saying like face up, you get him the ball beyond the 3-point line, he's squaring up and he's attacking you off the dribble in a face up setting. Like, do you see that?
Yeah, it's hard. We have not seen it yet. I will say that we absolutely have not seen it yet. Part of the problem there is that he's willing to settle for that. Like he's almost willing to settle for the contested three a little bit too often for my liking. But I mean, he's just a freak. Like it's kind of something I just trust that it might come along. But even if it doesn't come along, he's still a 20-12 guy.
Sure. You're not going to get you're not getting an argument from me as far as production. I think he's going to be like a multi-year all-star.
Yeah.
I just don't know if you find his kind of player on a title team. That's my issue with him is like the value areas to me. It's really hard to be an elite offensive big if you use like an RPM metric. Let's just say you use like a +1 offensive player. There's only 6 of those centers in the league this year. Nikola Jokic, Karl Anthony Towns, DeMarcus Cousins, Kevin Love, Joel Embiid, Dirk Nowitzki. All those guys either shoot the ball at a high level or they play make and self-create at a high level. It's more of a face-up game now. And I think that Ayton can do that potentially, but I don't see him getting to the level of any of those guys, either a shooter or a self-creator. So I look at that and I look at history. I don't know, man. Like, of course, Shaq. Some people think Ayton's Shaq. He's not 325 pounds, and we've talked about his level of physicality not really being there. It's just not a lot of precedent for me seeing this guy on a title team, but there's a lot of precedent seeing this guy as an all-star. Like I've compared him to Drummond in the past. He's way more skilled than Drummond. Okay, yeah. So I'm with you. Like I could even see him being like a 5-time all-star. I think that's in his range of outcomes for sure. I just, again, look at history. I don't see his kind of player on a title team.
Is he kind of more athletic LaMarcus Aldridge?
That's always been my thing is I've always seen him as a combination of Andre Drummond and LaMarcus Aldridge. That's exactly what I see. But can he shoot off movement like LaMarcus at his ceiling? Probably, right?
Probably.
Maybe.
I think so. Probably. Yeah, I mean, if he is super athletic LaMarcus Aldridge, he's probably going to be able to defend at that stage. Like I do not think he is nearly as bad a defender as the general populace does. And I will say this, I am writing a thing on The Athletic. I've talked to a lot of Pac-12 coaches. They don't think he was as bad a defender as the internet does either. I actually think he's, after going back and watching, kind of a plus defender for Arizona last year. Like absolutely a plus defender for Arizona last year. He's a guy that you can use to, like, so what Arizona does on ball screens, right, is they hard hedge almost everything. He was, anytime they would involve him, they would involve Ristich a lot more than they would involve Ayton, because why wouldn't you? But anytime that he was asked to like hard hedge out and recover, it was damn near impossible for offenses to start anything they wanted to initiate. And he always recovered, no issue. The weak side rotation stuff, again, I come back to the same stuff with Bagley. They were a pack line defensive scheme that, you know, in the pack line, the entire goal is to dissuade middle penetration and dissuade ball penetration. Like, it is expected that you do not just kind of give up at the point of attack like Arizona did this year. And the problem with Arizona's personnel was you had Parker Jackson Cartwright coming over from the help side sometimes. Parker is like 5'9" and has like 5'11" wingspan. And you had Alonzo Trier coming over from the weak side, who I like Alonzo more than most guys. I think he's going to play in the NBA. I think that you would be stretching to call him an average college defender.
Sure.
You know, Raleigh Alkins was coming off of a broken foot. He was not nearly the defender he was as a freshman, was a pretty bad defender this year, I think. Dylan Smith, we talked about on the last podcast. I don't need to go there again. You had so many guys kind of just giving up at the point of, not even giving up, but like just so unable to contain penetration at the point of attack that I think it made their bigs look a lot worse than they actually were in terms of being able to read weak side help situations.
I think there's credence to that. I think the situation obviously wasn't ideal. And I'm not saying these situations are similar, because they're not as far as scheme, but can't you make arguments that like Jaren Jackson played out of position 2 at the 4, and he still was like one of the best defenders in college basketball?
Yeah,
and
but
you still,
like Michigan State is a much better defensive team. Like Tum Tum Nairn is an awesome defender who played a ton of minutes this year for Michigan State at the point of attack.
Sure.
You know, Josh Langford is long and gives a shit defensively for the most part. Miles Bridges is a good defender in college. Like, they had a lot there.
Sure, but then you see Jaren Jackson on some of his blocks. I'd say probably even 20 blocks this year, where he's coming down from the three-point line, like timing blocks off his assignment. You just don't see those kinds of instincts from Ayton. You know what I mean? Like, I get it wasn't like, a good situation for him.
We're comparing, like, DeAndre Ayton and Jaren Jackson, when Jaren Jackson is like a legit potential defensive player of the year candidate, where like Ayton, I think, is a potential really good defender. Like, not like they're on different planes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm just trying to suss out the difference between, see, this is how I view Ayton. I view him as a plus potentially on both ends if he figures out enough defensively, because I think the mobility gives him advantages that a lot of guys that react slowly don't have.
Why can't he be Steven Adams defensively?
I mean, Steven Adams is a whole different level of like physical toughness. Like, I don't think Ayton plays that big. So Adams is an outlier.
He does play that big though. Like, if you see him around the basket, he plays that big, and he's quicker than Adams.
Sure. 100%. I think Adams is kind of an outlier here, just as far as just how he uses his body. Is not like anybody I've seen in the league currently. Like, he's kind of atypical. I view Ayton as a potential plus on both ends. I just don't see impact on both ends. And I don't judge offense by necessarily production, like 26 and 12. It's how you get that production, to me, on a title team.
So, but here's the thing. If you're averaging 20 and 12 this year, and he did it on a 65 true shooting percentage with a turnover rate of 11%. Like, what more impact do you want? Like, I mean
on offense, I'm with you. Like, I'm not like dissuading or discouraging anything he did on the college level as an offensive player. He's an elite level finisher. He's great around the basket. I love his touch.
So let's say he is 23 and 24 and 12 and does it on a 60% true shooting percentage with a super low turnover rate. That's super impactful. It's super valuable.
Yeah. I mean, again, for me, it comes down to contextualizing it in the realm of winning basketball. Like, if you're an all-star player, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are a championship level player. I think Andre Drummond making the all-star team this year proves that. His team couldn't even make the playoffs. And I get the situation was really bad on the perimeter in Detroit.
Yeah, I mean, like,
but I'm saying that, like,
Jackson was their second best player for half the year.
Oh, sure, 100%. I'm just saying that, like, again, there's not a lot of examples of guys like Ayton making the finals. I'm just saying, like, straight up, that is a fact. Like, I've looked at all of this. Most of the guys are lower usage guys who space the floor. They're more in an archetype of Jaren Jackson. You rarely see guys who are offensive hubs like Ayton that make it. Again, we're talking about Shaquille O'Neal, Tim Duncan, Kevin Garnett, Dirk Nowitzki. It's a very select list. And if that's how I'm kind of approaching this, is the ceiling to me is all about winning when you can do that. Like when you can afford to do that in a draft. Like there's a lot of drafts where Ayton would be the number one pick for me. Like he's that damn good. I'm not saying he's a bad prospect. I'm just saying that in this specific class, I view a guy like Jaren Jackson, and I see a cleaner avenue to him on a title team than DeAndre Ayton, if that makes sense.
I think it makes sense, but like one of the things that a lot of people complained about for a long time within the NBA was that just generally, like, there were not a ton of big men that entered the league, right? Like there were not a ton of like really good ones that entered the league basically until like DeMarcus got there, right? Like there were years where you look back at the big men who made the All-Star game and you're like, what the fuck? Like Jamal McGlure? Like how did this happen? You know what I mean? Like there was a down period that I think kind of coincided nicely with a down period for the big man in the NBA. And just because a team doesn't make it's you're kind of making the like, should Mike Trout ever be MVP argument, kind of. And like, of course Mike Trout should be MVP every year. He's incredible. He's impacting winning everywhere, all over the field. And like, if DeAndre Ayton is impacting winning all over the basketball court, which, you know, we just said that we think he can be a plus defender. We think he can be a plus offensive player. Like, are we complaining basically about the fact that like past big men haven't had good teammates?
No, I'm saying that like the degree of the plus. I'm saying I'm not as high as you are on either side of the ball. I'm saying a slight plus on both sides. I think he's going to be a good player, like an all-star level player. But you look historically, you look even in the current framework, the elite offensive bigs are elite. The elite defensive bigs are elite. Rudy Gobert, Draymond Green. You can go down the list. Those guys are elite players at something, and you find them on the best teams because they are so good at something. And like with Ayton, I don't know if that's in his range of outcomes even to be like super high level either. I think he's going to be quality potentially. Defensively, I think at his peak, he is a positive defender, but not an impactful one. That's how I see him. Okay, so like, what would we call Chris Bosh? Like, Chris Bosh is a probable Hall of Famer, right? Like, in my opinion, he's a definite Hall of Famer. But like, you know, Chris Bosh won 2 titles and went to 4 straight finals. Obviously, he was led by LeBron, but like, that's pretty good. Like, and like Chris Bosh, it took him a while to learn to shoot. You know, Chris Bosh was 26-12 with good defense and was a guy who could eventually knock down the corner 3. Like, why do we think DeAndre can't do that? I mean, Chris Bosh fits more the archetype that I'm talking about with Jaren Jackson as like the third option as a shooter, right? Sure. If you think DeAndre can get to that level of shooting, that's what I was kind of getting at with these elite level players in the league right now offensively. Yeah. If you can shoot the 3 at a high level, I'm with you 100%. If that's what you think he can become. Okay, here's a second one. What about Pau Gasol? Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. Pau is definitely a Hall of Famer. He is an offensive-minded Hall of Famer. He played next to Kobe. Like, you know, maybe DeAndre doesn't get to the level where he is the number one option on a title team because how many guys have ever been a number one option on a title team? Like, it's hard. There are like probably 20, something like that all time. Yep. So like you get to that level and you're talking about like just a revolutionary basketball player. I don't think I'm there on DeAndre Ayton, but like he's really good. He's going to be impactful on both ends of the floor. And he's going to be an all-star. Sure. And I think with Pau, it's just Pau is another level to me. Maybe shooting, because Pau didn't really shoot threes at a high level. So that I grant you that. But as a decision maker and like a passer and as a playmaker, like Pau could turn and face and like attack you off the bounce. Again, I just don't see the handling fluidity with Ayton either. So I think the disconnect is I'm just generally lower on a lot of his skill level. Like I agree with the athleticism. I agree with the coordination and the skill for his archetype. Like if you're comparing him to DeAndre Jordan, Andre Drummond, clearly he's light years better than those guys with the ball. But if we're comparing him to like a Pau Gasol or like a shooter as Chris Bosh or something like that, I just don't see it. Yeah, I get where you're coming from. I do. We can find common ground, but I really do think like DeAndre Ayton he can be a very real, if not the best player on a title team, just because again, probably 20 people in NBA history have been the best player on a title team. He can be a very real second option on a title team, I think. It's fair. I mean, I'm less optimistic on that just based on his style of play and, again, historical precedent, but it's possible. I'm not going to rule it out, but I would bet against that. I would bet against him again. I mean, I'm not saying this guy's bad. Again, I'm saying he's going to be a multi-year
This is all in the margins. Like, what we're talking about here is all nitpicky. You know what I mean?
100%. And, like, again, I think this guy's a great prospect, and this is just the kind of class we have in the fit in the modern game and all of that. People can have different opinions on him, and I think this is going to be helpful to listeners just to kind of hear different sides of the argument in different ways that we're kind of framing it, again, going back to some philosophy and what we value in players.
Yeah. Give me the super athletic dudes who are super productive. That's basically what it comes down to for me.
And give me the super high IQ guys with elite skill level. So I think that's where we're seeing the dichotomy here.
Kind of is where it goes, isn't it?
Yep.
That's about all I got, man. We've gone through the top 17 here. 17, Zaire Smith. 16, Troy Brown. 15, Robert Williams. 14, Lonnie Walker. 13, Kevin Knox. That's tier 4. Mikal Bridges, number 12. Number 11, Wendell Carter. Number 10, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Number 9, Colin Sexton. Number 8, Miles Bridges. Number 7, Trae Young. Number 6, Michael Porter Jr. That's tier 3. Number 5, Mohamed Bamba. Number 4, Jaren Jackson. Number 3, Marvin Bagley. That's tier 2. And then tier 1, Luka Doncic and DeAndre Ayton at number 1. How do we think we did? How do you think I did ranking these prospects?
I mean, you ranked him, and that's more than I can say for myself. So, I mean, it was impressive. I mean, thanks for having me on. This was a fun exercise. I love doing this every year. Like last year, I mean, you nailed Jason Tatum at number 2, and you know, I didn't buy in enough to that. So it's fun to talk this through. Like even if we're debating, I think it's beneficial to both of us and to the listeners to really suss out the intricacies of not only who these players are, but how we value them tiers wise and all of that.
Yeah, like it really does help me talk through all of this just like live with you, like for the listeners even, because like I'm probably a little bit lower on Lonnie Walker now than when we started. I'm probably a little bit higher on Miles Bridges than when we started. Probably maybe even like a touch higher on Wendell Carter than from when we started. So
there we go.
Yeah, like it really does help, I think, both of us talk through it, but it helps the listeners too while we just yell at each other back and forth.
100%, man.
Cole, tell the people where they can find your work.
God willing, at thestepien.com. I will actually get to writing a big board next week, but it's going to take that long. Like I have 2 more guys to catch up on internationally, Musa and Elia Kobo, as everybody's freaking out about. So I got to watch them this weekend. But look for that to step in next week. We will have updated rankings, and as you continue to listen to this podcast.
Yeah, no, go to the Stepien, go read Cole's work. Who is the guy that you are least high on in this class? If you had to pick one now that you're pretty much through.
Least high on? What do you mean? Like relative to consensus?
Yeah, relative to consensus.
Oh, man, that's really tough. I think it's a group of guys. It's just the guys that I'd bet on late teens, early 20s, maybe even higher than that. Like Kevin Knox, I've actually talked myself into a little bit, weirdly enough, like maybe 16, 17. But him, Colin Sexton, Lonnie Walker, the high pedigree guys that I just didn't really see it from this year. And some of that situation, we've talked about Lonnie Walker, Kevin Knox, not great scenarios. But I'd say those 3 guys stand out as people that I'm a little more trepidatious about taking gambles on higher in the draft. Like I know you're with me on Lonnie Walker now, but I can't really fathom taking him at 9 or 10, even though he's a great kid. No. You know, but that's just too rich for my blood, man.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like some people do have Miles Bridges ahead of him on their board, and I'm just like, this is bananas. Like we said earlier in the podcast, even a guy like Kevin Knox, I have to have ahead of him. Trying to think if I can answer that. I've come back to the equation on Zaire Smith, I guess, right? Like I'm not crazy low on him now.
I mean, yeah, top 17 is entirely reasonable. I think I let myself get away for a little bit with him, and I reeled myself back in. So I have him probably in the 11 to 15 range, but we're pretty much in concert there.
It's Mitchell Robinson. Yeah, it's Mitchell Robinson.
Where do you have him?
Like 33.
Okay.
Like I'm not betting on that.
So is that mostly character, I'm guessing, or?
I'm not betting on that.
Fair enough.
I have like Landry Shaman at like 40. Is that low?
I have him as a top 24 guy, but I have him more towards like 23, 24. I just really value his ability to shoot off movement. But yeah, I mean, he did not have a good combine. His momentum has been bad. You saw him play live, and he was terrible in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I was not a fan. I was less a fan of when I saw him live. Yeah, I think that's as far as we need to go. I'll have you on again at some point next week. We're done. We're cutting it. It's over. Please go subscribe to the Game Theory Podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, Android, Pocket Casts, whatever podcasting app you use. We're up there now. Thanks to our sponsor, forhims.com. It seems like so long ago that we read that advertisement, but remember to use that promo code Game Theory at forhims.com/Game Theory for that trial membership. We'll be back at some point next week. I'll probably have someone on other than Cole just to break up the momentum a little bit. Not that Cole would even deny any chance to come on the pod. But until next time, we will talk soon. Bye.